to do tonight. So I'm very excited because, as you know, there are all these padhatis, all these ritual manuals, and I'm in the work of editing them, translating them, arranging them, like making padhatis that we can actually use. It'll be a while until like it's all translated in a way that I'm comfortable with or satisfied with. And it'll be a while before they're all edited because God knows of all the Indian genes that like express themselves in this one, like the tech support, good at technology gene was not one of them. So I'm still struggling to like use all of the technological tools and whatnot. So it'll take a while before I actually figure out my way around the Google Doc. So we'll give me a bit on that. But soon, hopefully, we'll have in front of us a padhati that we can actually use with the Devanagari, with the transliteration, with the translation. But of course, a big part of the work is explaining what the mantras mean and explaining why we would want to do certain rituals. Like my interest in the ritual itself is not so much in the what or in the how. Although that's incredibly valuable, we have to first preface all of that with the why. Like we have to understand the meaning of the mantras, like what the words are pointing to. And because it's a Tantric text, the padhatis, the ritual manuals, because these are Tantric literature materials, it's going to be very like coded. Each verse is going to be like couched in some very subtle and intricate nuances, which I think that should take most of our time. So what I want to do now is explore some of these nuances. I'm just going to walk you through a padhati. Of course, we could do a few different things. It's a puja class. We're just working through the padhati that you already have. And the next thing is the worship of Narayana, the worship of Vishnu, having already discussed Shiva Puja, and before that Ganesh Puja, and before that Guru Puja, and actually even before that Surya Puja. The next step is to talk about Narayana Puja, the worship of Vishnu, and with Vishnu comes Saraswati and Lakshmi also, for reasons that we'll explain in that class. But I was going to save that for next week, because as you know, the next Purnima, the coming full moon, is very important. It's holy. And Holika is like a celebration of the killing of a demon. It has a Bhagavatam sort of mythological structure. But what people do is they go onto the streets and pelt each other with colored powders. Isn't that awesome? And it's a quintessential Bollywood music video template. You just like excitedly go onto the street and pelt people with colors. And it's a very colorful, exciting celebration. But it also, interestingly, besides just being a reference to this like demon-slaying saga, it's also a celebration of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthday. And although I didn't grow up Vaishnava, we speak mostly from a Shakta Shaiva point of view. Jai Ma, yeah, my Kapala, Jai Ma. I miss this guy, I haven't seen him in a while. My real Kapala. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ma. But Jai Ma, Jai Ma. And this question of Chaitanya is an important one because although I speak from a Shaiva Shakta point of view, and of course that's what we should be speaking from, we don't really have any business speaking about anything else, not really our tradition, but Chaitanya kind of is. It's an important thing to remember is that there's an overlap actually between what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching and our approach to spiritual life, especially within the Kaula Marga and the worship of Kali. Maybe part of that is metaphysical because the claim is that Kali and Krishna are the same. And of course, Chaitanya's entire tradition centers around Krishna. But importantly, it centers around the Gopi Leela. So when we think about Kali, a lot of the madness and ecstasy that we see in Kali, we see also reflected in Radha Rani and her love for Sri Krishna. So it's kind of mad love, and it's the kind of love that ruins your life. That's the link, I think, between Chaitanya and Kali. We'll explore it on Monday. In the Monday night lecture, we'll talk about Krishna and Kali and the link between Chaitanya, Ramakrishna, and Kali. Ramakrishna is kind of the bridge here. If you look at Hanuman, we look at Chaitanya's Kali, not just, Chaitanya's Krishna, see? Freudian slip. Bhakta slip. If you think of Chaitanya's Kali, it's a specific way of presenting Kali, you know, and it comes very close to Kali. Again, another slip. It's a specific way of presenting Krishna, and it comes very close to Kali. Their bīja mantras are the same. So we'll talk about what the similarity is. I'll just for now, just offer a preface to that conversation we're going to have on Monday. And it's something along the lines of not just the fact they have the same bīja, I want to ask why. Again, why do they have the same bīja? And I'm going to argue this. In the Shaiva tradition, you get a strong emphasis on asceticism. So you see that with Hanuman, because Hanuman is the yogi par excellence. He sits and he meditates, and through meditation, he acquires the powers that typically come as a result of doing a meditative practice. They're called the Ashta Siddhis. So Hanuman is powerful. He's empowered through asceticism, through austerities, tapasya. So in the Hanuman Chalisa, attributed to Tulsidasa, he's called Tapasvi Raja, the king of austerities. And notice that's such a Shaiva thing to say, because austerities are usually performed outside of the city. They're often performed in the cremation ground. They're performed with this understanding of the ephemeral nature of all things. It must be the case that a person has a lot of renunciation if they're going to put that much energy into doing spiritual austerities, whether or not they care about spiritual powers. And so power, the pursuit of power, the use of sadhana in order to acquire power, these are things that are of course very prevalent in the Shaiva world. much to its chagrin, actually, because these are things that the tradition is actually sometimes embarrassed about. But Shiva, there's no way to get around it. Shiva is an empowered yogi. Like, he's full of power, hence the serpents. He's often adorned with serpents, representing his almost mastery over magic, or his mastery over Maya or illusion. So rather than the serpents having the power to bite him and poison him, in fact, they're his friends. He's a serpent charmer of sorts, and he's one with his kundalini, such that it empowers him. It doesn't have power over him. It empowers him, and it's a power through which he expresses himself. So Shiva is a meditator, an ascetic, who does spiritual practices and gets siddhis through that. You can obviously see how Hanuman, by meditating and doing spiritual practices and being ascetic and getting spiritual powers, is a clear analog for that. But it's also important, the Hanuman Chalisa. Look, I'm accidentally giving my lecture, which I'm supposed to give on Monday now. I'm sorry, I'm just playing with these ideas. I'm just not thinking about them, so bear with me. But Hanuman, notice, the Chalisa itself, the Hanuman Chalisa, is composed not in no other place than in Varanasi. Isn't that really interesting? It's an interesting fact, actually, that Tulsidasa was in Shiva's holy city when he composed the Hanuman Chalisa. Because notice, at the end, he says, Sakhi Gaurisha, my witness is the Lord of Gauri, the Lord of Parvati, meaning Shiva. With Shiva as my witness, I thus declare that anybody who chants this, and then he gives a kind of falashruti about what happens when you chant the Hanuman Chalisa. This is really important to me, that like this was composed in Varanasi because it has the flavor of Varanasi. When I was in Kashi, I was very lucky because I met a sadhu who was able to point out the house where Tulsidasa lived. I was doubly lucky because one of the priests was walking out of the house and then offered to let me go in and see the house and see the Hanuman who allegedly was worshipped when Tulsidas was there. So now the Mahant, the head Swami of the, not Swami, Brahmana, the head Brahmana of the Sankata Mochana temple in Varanasi, he lives there. So it's like the residence of the Sankata Mochana temple Hanuman priest or whatever. So they were very kind to us and we got to see the place. It was beautiful. It's like just on the banks of the Ganga near Asighat. And maybe when we go together, I can show you. It's a beautiful house and very old Varanasi style house, looking out over the Ganga. It's gorgeous. And it's just saturated with the flavor of Shiva. You know, you can't live there for a long period of time without imbibing that Shiva flavor. You could smell Harishchandra Ghat. Not Manikarnika, is a bit further up, but you could just smell that Ghat, the burning ground, where the bodies are being burned. And there Tulsidasa meditated and contemplated Rama and composed his Ram Charitmanas and composed his Hanuman Chalisa. So Hanuman, bhavically, is very close to Shiva. Notice the Bija mantra tells you this. The Bija mantra is a clue. Because in the Tantric world, when we do puja to Hanuman, the Bija mantra we use the same as the one we use for Bhairava or for Shiva. So the Shiva Bhairava Bija mantra is shared because Hanuman, like Bhairava, is full of rage and full of power and full of fury, and at times he does things that he later regrets. Like Swami Vivekananda, like Shiva, like Bhairava, like for instance Hanuman accidentally almost burnt Lanka to the ground. And in so doing, he could have killed Sita. And so he's like, oh my god, I'm sorry. But that was his rage. Notice he couldn't control his rage in that moment. Sounds familiar? That's exactly the narrative structure of Shiva and how he deals with his rage. And so the rage is good though. The rage implies that these are living, empowered spiritual masters. It's not like there's stone Buddha in the Caucasian garden. That's the phrase that I use now, because it's a kind of like great flattening of Buddhism to think the Buddha is just this guy that sits peacefully. In the stories about the Buddha, he was madly in love. And I don't know a single person who is in love, who isn't mad, and who isn't active. Do you know, like, to me, and this could just be like a projection, but I somehow feel like the way love was in the Christ and the way that love was in the Buddha, it was necessarily dynamic. It meant that they got up off their asses. And it meant like a restlessness almost. Look in the case of the Buddha, he was just wandering up and down the street. There's a street, I've often pointed this out, in Varanasi, in Bodh Gaya, which is quite a drive actually from us, but like in Bodh Gaya, there's this place, like they named that street after the Buddha because allegedly he walked up and down the street, he was pacing that street like a kind of caged lion, allegedly. He was pacing restlessly, looking for people to whom he could convey this teaching. So upon attaining the teaching, he fell in love. The teaching is actually synonymous with love. Like you can't recognize Shunya without also recognizing Mahakaruna. And people have asked why. Like why is it that when you realize the no self, you also fall in love with all beings? It's like if you're not of self and no one else is too, how do you explain the animal hospitals that the Buddha founded?
Great compassion?
Mahakaruna, that's what it means, right? Exactly. Maha, great, Karuna. Because it's supposed to distinguish this kind of Karuna from the regular kind of compassion. Like, it makes sense if I have compassion for, oh fuck, I guess this is just turning into the Krishna Kali lecture. I'm like, wait, I have to rein this in. We have a puja class. I'm actually really enjoying this. Sorry, you guys. This is a fun line of inquiry. Because we don't plan any of this beforehand, but like I'm enjoying where this is going, where this conversation is going. So let me just explore it a little more if you don't mind. I'll say more on Monday. I think I'll flesh it out on Monday. I probably won't actually, because on Monday we'll have something else to talk about. So I better like get this out while it's here. But this is how it has something to do with our puja class. This is my stretch. Because about bīja mantras, right? You'll see the bīja mantras are tantric esoteric word symbols that we use in the context of puja and also in the context of japa. But the bīja mantra that is attributed to a particular deity in the tradition is importantly the energy and essence of that deity. So some deities, of course, their mantras have more than one bija, and each bija can be explained in many different ways. Actually, Vidya Devi last week was asking some really good questions about certain bija mantras, and the first thing we said was, it's hard to answer any of these questions because the bija mantras are something that are perhaps experienced in mystic vision, and therefore they don't lend themselves easily to the language of the mind, which can only really deal with things in a very immanent way. It doesn't have much currency, actually. Your bills have no currency here. It doesn't have much currency in the transcendental plane. And so therefore we can only elliptically and poetically and indirectly and maybe even inadvertently gesticulate at this transcendental truth in which bija mantras vibrate. So you can't talk about bija mantras. You can only chant them. You can chant them again and again and again. And through millions of repetition, the meaning of the bija mantra might start to reveal itself to you, like a seed pressed for oil. Slowly, slowly the oil comes out, the fragrance comes out. But the pressing is important. Each time we repeat the mantra, we're pressing that sesame seed, as my guru was saying the other day. Friction, we're rubbing. The word for sex, sangata, rubbing. Here, the real desire is for God, and the friction that's being generated is my longing for God and God's parting from me. And that's expressed kinetically with my hands when I'm thumbing the rosary. You know, so I see people thumbing the rosary, I'm like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, it's like, where's your anger? Where's your longing? Where's your fear? Where's your passion? Where's your life? When we thumb the rosary, we should thumb it with life, as if our lives depended on it. Because don't they? We've looked everywhere for love, and no sex that the world could give me was ever the kind of friction that generated the kind of heat that I wanted. The kind of intensity, the kind of heat I wanted was the self-immolating kind. I wanted to light that kind of fire in which I would be completely consumed. And instead, every fire that I've plunged into, whether it's a romantic relationship or whether it's a new possession or whether it's a new job, everything that has inspired me, that has set my soul on fire, has been a beautiful roaring fire, but it hasn't devoured me. I'm still here. I'm not like a moth completely reduced to ash. I somehow survived it. My personality, my ego, my sense of who I think I am, my worldview, it somehow survived all the various fires I've tried to jump into. Isn't that interesting? How resilient this ego. It's fireproof. And so I need a really strong fire. The world's not going to cut it anymore. The jobs aren't going to cut it. The relationships might not cut it. They might, of course, because God comes to us in the form of other people. But like there's a fire that we're all craving, a real life. It's like there's a Bruce Springsteen song where he's like on fire. Mm-hmm. And what a beautiful song, like that longing. He's like he's like longing for something. You know, what is that? We all long for it, and it's life, and it's the fire. But we need that self-immolating fire, something really strong. And that tapasya, that's what it's called. Tapasya. It's glowing, heating. It lights us up. So when we do japa, we're repeating the mantra. We're like squeezing the sesame seed for oil, and we're just like thumbing the rosary. We should do that with force and with fury, actually. And this will bring me to Chaitanya and Ramakrishna and Kali in just a little bit. It'll bring me to bhāvic. It'll bring me to this way of living in spiritual life, which is a far cry from the stone Buddha meditating silently in the garden, which I think is a total misrepresentation of love in one sense. It doesn't have to be. I'm sure that's love too. But at least in our view, love is dynamic. Love is Shakti. I'll come to Mahakaruna in a moment. But notice, when we're doing japa, that's sangata, that's friction, that's tapasya. And so when we're thumbing the rosary, it's like after millions of repetitions, finally we start to intuit, elliptically, inadvertently, the meaning of a bija mantra. And even once it starts to reveal its meaning to us, we would never be able to convey it anyway in words. So we just like write stories about it, we write poems about it, we elliptically and inadvertently gesture and gesticulate at it. But its meaning is known only to us, and it's known transcendentally. It's known in the pashanti, in visionary terms, which don't lend themselves to madhyama or vaikari terms of the mind or terms of regular dualistic speech. So if you ask, what does a bija mantra mean? It's impossible to say. Even if you knew. And who knows? Like, very few of us know. Very few of us have the sadhana to know, the spiritual practice to know, and even the very few rare individuals amongst us that do know, or know something at least of the infinite depth of the bija, those who know something, a little something, even they won't be able to say anything really about it. So they have to like talk about Advaita Vedanta, and talk about other things that the mind can talk about, right? Like language that can be helpful. That's why Sri Shankara is very careful when he explains why Brahman cannot be pointed to directly. Pratar bhajami manasa vachasama gamyam vacho vibhati nikhila yadanugrahena neti neti vachanayar nigama avocham stamdeva deva machama chutuhura griyam. I bow to that God of gods prior to all things, who is beyond all words and thought, and yet who is the light in which words and thought shine. You know, that nikhila, in which all words, actually, by whose grace, anugraha, by whose grace comes forth all words and thoughts. So because it's prior to words and thoughts, it's the cause, and the effect are words and thoughts, if in one sense. Shankara doesn't really like think of, in terms of cause and effect, doesn't get into that whole temporality, cause, anything. But here notice he's saying, it's avang manasa gochara, it's the field beyond all words and thoughts. So even Shankara is very careful about how he uses language. He uses language to talk about the things that language can talk about, which is what Brahman is not. That's why yan neti neti vachanayar. You can talk about these things, and by talking about them exhaustively, you can intuit that thing, which is what I am, which I can never say. So he's saying, yan neti neti vachanayar nigama avocham. Our nigamas, our texts, have spoken about this only indirectly. And in other places, he'll give 5 or 6 like things that words can do. And he'll say why Brahman is not the kind of thing that is susceptible to the way words work. So it's not something we can talk about. And if we talk about why we can't talk about it, like I'm doing now. Isn't that interesting? So in one sense...
Ineffable.
It's ineffable. I think that's the word. It's ineffable. And in one sense, we don't need to talk about it. That's the exciting thing. It's like, it would be important to talk about this if through talking and inquiring and thinking, we could learn something about it. But we can't learn something about it in that way. But then we ask, can we learn something about it in some other way? And the answer is yes, through sadhana, through repetition. So by aggressively and with full sincerity and with full eagerness, by thumbing that rosary, by squeezing that seed, then some knowledge can come, but it is not the kind of knowledge that we regularly have with everyday cognition. Therefore, we call it bhāvic, to distinguish it from aparavidya, from secular knowledge. Not just like demean that is equally holy, but this is the transcendent knowledge that is known only to the heart and never to the mind. That's why bija mantras cannot really be explained. But we like a good challenge. So in the Tantric world, there are texts like the Kala Kama Vilasa. So Kama Kala Vilasa, my bad, Kama Kala Vilasa, a Hadi Vidya text in the Sri Vidya tradition. Like there, we'll give a bija mantra and explain what it symbolizes. So we'll say, okay, we don't know the meaning of this bija, but it is the bija that expresses the sexual union and the bliss of union, Yamala Ananda, between Shiva and Shakti. So Shiva, who is this entire universe, feels bliss in his totality, Purnahamta. And that bliss of being in all things as all things is like is described in these erotic terms of like union with his Shakti. That is called the bija mantra, and it's given Eem, or just E, like that. And then you can see when you take that sound, E, which is called Icha, desire, and Ishana, the satisfaction of that desire. If you take that E sound, and then you combine it with other letters, like or like Hara, or like Kra, then it explains something about the nature of that bija. So much so that I might not be able to explain the bija, but I can at least name it. I know naming is not explaining, but naming helps. So I can say, okay, the bija that Vidya Devi was asking about is called Shrishti bija. Already I've said something about what that bija is. Shrishti means to create. So that bija is associated to the Guru, it's associated to Saraswati, but you can see its like function is to project, to create. And then we described it even in terms of the Shatkona. We used very, like, in that conversation with Vidya Devi a few weeks ago, we used some very, like, maybe overly esoteric language about the way the, like, Sanskrit language works, and how if you combine with and with E, you get A, like that, like the way you get the diphthongs, you know, the short vowels combined with the long vowels to make other long vowels. So vowels like A, I, O, Ow, they're like combinations of shorter vowels. So if you take A and you combine it with another triangle, so what you get is like this downward pointing triangle, A, and already orthographically, morphologically, if indeed A is a downward pointing triangle, you know that A mantra refers to the yoni. It has a Shakti element of immanence-oriented movement. Then if you take the other triangle and it's oriented upwards, you see it's the in one sense that triangle is the yoni and the other triangle is the lingam. Yoni and lingam together, you see that's the yamala, the shatkona, which is sometimes called the samanya kaula yantra, which we use in so many different kaula pujas. It's just two triangles together. Samanya means general. Samanya, kaula, meaning the spiritual tradition of vamachara, kaulachara, like the worship of the goddess essentially. And therefore, the yantra is depicting maybe the most important term, at least metaphorically, if not in some cases literally. The term is the union of Shiva and Shakti. And that is symbolized by a six-pointed triangle, but that six-pointed triangle is a geometric, visual depiction of the sound called the Shrishti Bija. So the name does something for us. Because it's through the union of lingam and yoni that a child comes. So similarly, it's through the union of Shiva, pure consciousness and energy, that this universe appears. Like the creative act is understood in all these levels, Actually, you know what it is? I've realized this. I think this is just a religion of creativity, of dynamism. And what is creativity but dynamism? Therefore, it's one of the most important bijas. Unsurprisingly, I'll show you a Vaishnava Tantric Padati also during Chaitanya's week. And people are always like, why are you so obsessed with Chaitanya? Like, why is it that like whenever Holi comes around, I'll do like 6 or 7 lectures on Chaitanya? We have a Tantric Vaishnavism playlist in which we're just talking about Chaitanya. And it's like quite clear that I'm like obsessed with Chaitanya because of Ramakrishna, because of things that I'm going to tell you about. Because I don't talk about Krishna. I don't have any authority or right to because I'm not in that world, right? And also I don't like to talk about Krishna because it's maybe too personal and private, too secret in one sense. It is Kali. Like Krishna is Kali, but for a reason, you hear that all the time. It's like, it's a cheap thing to say these days. It's like, Krishna is Kali, Krishna is Kali. I just let's talk about why. What is the link? And hopefully in this like little discussion that we're having, which is all preamble for maybe, ideally, a wider discussion on a similar topic next week, and which is also right now a preamble to the Padati that I want to show you as part of our puja class. Forgive me and indulge me just a few moments longer. I thought I would say a few things about that connection. So coming back to this idea of Mahakarana, it's this dynamism, that we're looking at. So when you get bīja mantras, and this is a digression on bīja mantras, you'll see why it's important in just a moment. The bīja mantra cannot be explained, I don't think. It can be felt, it can be intuited, and through regular practice, and by regular practice we mean maybe over the course of a lifetime or several lifetimes, or just really intense practice in the course of your sadhana. Could be 12 years, could be 12 minutes, it could be 12 seconds, it depends on the intensity. But after a lot of intense sadhana, perhaps intense and over a long period of time, that kind of sadhana, after that only we get the meaning. And interestingly, different deities are expressed by sometimes the same bija, which is very stunning. Each deity typically has a bija. Because if you take that E sound, of course, the deity is itself an expression of bliss. Like our Gurudeva was saying the other day, every deity is a condensation of consciousness. Chidghana Kaya. In Swamiji's Kandana Bhava Bandhana. There in that song, in Bengali, he says that Sri Ramakrishna is nothing but, he doesn't say nothing but, he doesn't use the word mataram or eva or ekam. He says Chidghana Kai. Kai means kaya in Sanskrit, body. Chidghana means mass of consciousness. But Chidghana, it's a very popular phrase even in the Tantric Shakta world because it refers to a kind of corporeality, kind of embodiment. It's a very kaula word actually, ghana. Ghana means mass, but how can you say consciousness is massive? The impression you get with many non-dual transcendental traditions is lightness and air and space. So it's emptiness. It's luminous emptiness. Isn't that interesting? Luminous emptiness. It gives you a different flavor. Whereas with the Kaula tradition, we're always talking in terms of like ocean. It's a Kularnava. Arnava means ocean, so it's the ocean of embodiment. Kularnava. One of my favorite names now for Ma is Kularnava Lahari, a wave that arises on the ocean of God's embodiment. God embodied is Kali, and she's always rising like a wave. Another word for her that's very famous in the tradition is Urmi. Urmi means a wave. Even the word is onomatopoeic. Urmi. And isn't that what desire feels like, honestly? Love, like compassion, it feels like a wave that swells in the heart. It's a swell. In fact, kinchit chalane, the word for spanda, throb or pulse, it's kinchit chalane, it's called swelling. You'll see a lot of times when the text translate the word spanda, they don't translate as pulse or throb. Those are very modern ways of translating it. A lot of times I've seen the word spanda, which is its root is spadi, kinchit chalane. It means, in some translations, it has the connotation rather of swelling. Swelling as in something coming up. Which is like, like you can imagine the lingam in arousal, or like a woman like who is feeling passion for her lover, like that feeling of arousal, which can be in fear also and aversion also. It's like it's dynamic, And the dynamism of the ocean is the waves. So you could say, oh, the waves are nothing but ocean. But then you dismiss them, don't you? Like with the ocean, really be an ocean if it wasn't waving at you? And that's the point. Like, the ocean is nothing but water, but that water is dynamic. It has tides, it surges, it's frothy, and it's glorious that it surges and writhes and sometimes angry. The ocean can be very angry at times. Haven't you seen pitchy black waves reaching into the sky? I think it's quite important that Swamiji is also talking about waves in his poem to Kali, except they're waves when the ocean is angry. He calls them pitchy black waves reaching into the pitchy sky or something, right? Like he's describing this scene where there's like lightning flashing. Of course, Raudri or Rudra. It's like the terror of nature, but it's also the fullness of the ocean. It's not just about the sky and the atmosphere and the storms and whatnot. It's also about the ocean, like broiling and rumbling, and that ocean is reaching up to the sky. Notice just how Swamiji is doing this. Just in one line, he's using the wildness of the sky and the wildness of the ocean and using them as a mirror for one another, the wildness of both of them. And then he's describing that the ocean has this kind of romance with the sky almost, where it's like reaching into the sky, into Shiva. Kali is reaching into Shiva, and the whole motion is described as spanda. And it's terrifying, because lightning is flashing and lunatics are loose and they're wrenching trees from their roots and all sorts of...
I like the idea of the moon controlling the tides.
Moon and the tides. Yeah, Shiva is the moon, Someshvara, and they're like there's a beautiful way of describing the avatara as like a bit of moonlight flickering on the waves of the ocean. And all the other fish think that it's a fish too. And they play with the moonfish. And then the clouds come and the moonfish disappears and they realize their friend who was amongst them was never really there. And yet was more there than anyone else they've ever known. The moonfish. Avataras like Krishna, like Sri Ramakrishna, are like the moonfish, playing with us for a little while and then they're gone. But they leave their radiance behind. So yeah, the ocean. Notice the spadi kinchit chalane, the spanda, the throb is a kind of swelling. It's an urmi. So I love the word kularnava. Kularnava means the embodied ocean. And she, the goddess, is that ocean. But importantly, she's experienced as the lahari, the Saundarya Lahari, the arising wave of desire and beauty and dynamism and karuna, love. So this love, the Buddha is talking about, Mahakaruna, is that wave. It's like a rising, it's a sort of emotion, and it can be stormy at times, The ocean can be angry, the ocean can be sad, the ocean can be laughing, and the ocean can be calm. Calm is also possible, that's there. The ocean has the power to be calm and has the power to be angry, but its glory is in its anger, I think. The glory of this world is its tragedy, which most spiritual traditions try to fix, but which this spiritual tradition tries to divinize. That's why the flavor of Kali the Mother is not like, oh, worship Kali and you'll be alright. It's rather worship Kali and you'll be worse off than ever before. But you'll be more alright than you've ever been because you'll learn what it is to deify death and tragedy and pain, and you'll see in that a greater life. Because otherwise, our spirituality is just Xanax embodied. There's nothing wrong with Xanax, it's wonderful. But it's like, that's also a valid form of spirituality, but it's headed towards a sort of disembodied, dissociative almost, I might say, numbness of the reality of life. That's why the world is rejected as illusion or void, or said to be empty, or pointed to and said, oh, it's not important, like the waves. The waves are just water, so don't think about the waves, think about the water. We're flipping that. Instead of, we're not saying, oh, just plunge back into the world. We're saying, no, reassess that thing that you're trying to throw away. The waves are the function of the ocean, the dynamism of the ocean. Without the waves, who cares for the ocean? Without this life, who cares for God? Isn't that interesting? God is this world, God is this life. And the world, say God is the world is very different from saying the world is God. Notice? The world is God is saying there's no transcendental reality. Saying that God is the world is saying there is only that transcendental reality, and this world is its glory. And in it, we can sing and dance and make merry.
It's like pantheism versus panentheism.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm actually warming up to pantheism, because I think Somananda might be presenting a pantheism, not a panentheism. In fact, I think there are some traditions, I'm finally starting to understand the difference between the 12 Kali and 13 Kali model. I think the 13 Kali model, which is the Maharta, not to be overly technical now, but I'm going to be, the Maharta or the Mahanaya, when they present 13 Kalis, sometimes they're presenting a panentheistic model, which actually contrasts the pantheistic model we find with the 12 Kalis. Just to be technical. So, you know what? This might be a pantheistic view. The world that we see now, like God is that world.
That seems like Kaula, so pantheistic.
Exactly, yeah. It's Kaula, because
panentheistic.
Like God is the world, and so to worship the world as God, proper panentheism without presenting an N, I think is the most like traditional classical form of Kaula. So there's nothing but the world. And thankfully, that's God. So I don't see the world first and then say God. Rather, having recognized God as the world, I worship the world like that. But then panentheism points to maybe a different experience where there's something that's experienced that I call not the world. Like say Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Then I might say just the N and not the pan. So entheism maybe like, okay, it's just God as the transcendent. And the world is either void, or it's an illusion, or it's not important, or it's something else. Then panentheism is this transcendent immanent view that this para, which I experience in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which I find on the roof, is actually the same substance as the steps. That the whole world that I had to like transcend, as it were, to experience this transcendence is nothing but that transcendence, except now it's wavy. And it's waving at me. And I myself am a wave in this body and mind, in the ocean of my true being, which I experience maybe most intensely when there aren't any waves. But then I realize, even if there are waves, it doesn't take away from the intensity of the experience. And then we get this more sahaja samadhi, eyes wide open kind of world. That is God. Okay, so anyway, not to digress, coming back to this. The bija mantra is not something that can really be explained, and yet the words are important. We call this the shishti bija, the hrit bija, lajja bija, kurcha bija. Sometimes those are just orthographic points. Kurcha means like a bundle, and this particular bija, when you draw it out, looks like a bundle. The ha sound looks a bit like a bundle. Kurcha. But these are all elliptical kind of code words that we use in the Tantric tradition to refer to bijas. Now, it's often believed that every bija is a rising, a swelling, a pulse, and a throb within the ocean of Satchidananda. So therefore, a lot of mantras start with Om. Even Om is a secret bija, did you know? I should probably not be saying Om the way I'm careful about saying other bijas. Even that bija I just told you, Eem, is a secret bija. It's not to be said out loud, actually. It's referred to as sometimes, not to confuse you, because it also refers to another bija, Kama bija, or the Kama Kala Vilasa bija, the bija of the playful deity who is desire. So it's secret. It should be kept secret because it's sacred. So I shouldn't have said that aloud. In fact, even Om I shouldn't say aloud. Do you know? Om is another one of those things that's so sacred, so secret, that we almost demean it. We cheapen it by saying it out loud. Kuleshwari and I just had a whole weekend of demeaning the Father. But we're like demeaning and desecrating the Mother, we say, when we make what is secret to her public to everyone else, you know. I mean, we're lucky because now she seems to herself want to make everything public, so it's blame it on the boss kind of thing, you know. She's mainstreaming herself, what can we do? She only made us do all this. But now the claim is that these secret bijas are not referred to directly, nor are they said aloud. They're referred to in code. So the Om, that bija, which is very popular now, is the pranava. Pranava bija. And it's considered to be pranava because it's prior to all things, and it's the ocean of vibration in which all other bijas exist. So if you say Om, you've already said every possible sound that can be said. What to say of bijas? You know, the bijas are of course included in every possible sound, and they are like the primordial building blocks from which all the other sounds come from. So if you say the word that contains all sounds, then in that word, in that pranava, there's also all the bijas. All the bijas, like say shishti bija, kama bija, hrit bija, lajja bija, kurcha bija, whatever bija you know, whatever sound you've encountered in the Tantric tradition, it's in Om. Therefore, you could turn that mantra into an entire sadhana. You could just chant that over and over and over again. So typically, it's that first in your mantra. Not always, sometimes. And sometimes they don't even give that because it's not important. It's already there. It's like not something you can even say and should say. It's just the truth. You know, remember that story? Janaka was sitting and meditating on the bank of the river next to his guru, Ashtavakra. Now, Janaka was doing japa. Soham, soham, soham. He was repeating the mantra, that I am, that I am, that I am. Hamsa, soham, soham. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra mantra. Or like, it's a popular mantra everywhere also. But he's repeating it. And Ashtavakra thinks, I better teach this fool a lesson. So Ashtavakra sits next to Janaka and says, this is my pot, this is my pot, this is my pot, this is my pot. Mama Kamandalu, Mama Kamandalu, Mama Kamandalu. Like, it's my water vessel. Again and again he's saying that. And Janaka, of course, this is Janaka's guru. So he's like, in the beginning, obviously going to be kind of tolerant. So he's like, just letting him go on. But it's going on for a while. Like an hour, 2 hours like that. Like, this is my pot, this is my pot, this is my... But Janaka can't focus on his mantra. He's trying to chant Soham, Soham, Soham. But next to him is the guru, obviously disrupting him. Mama Kamandalu, Mama Kamandalu, Mama Kamandalu. And so at that point, Janaka, he can't help it anymore. He turns and says to his guru, somewhat in an irritated fashion, why do you keep saying this? My pot, my pot, my pot. Of course it's your pot. Everybody knows it's your pot. Like, why are you saying it over and over and over again? And Ashtavakra turns to him and says, exactly. Exactly. Why are you saying Soham, Soham, Soham? It's just a fact. Like, you don't, it's not to be repeated. It is to be realized. You can't practice non-duality. Like, basically, Ashtavakra is saying you can't practice non-duality, you idiot. Because the moment you practice non-duality, you're implying a being and a becoming. And that becoming is supposed to give you being. But being is being. It just is. So you can't do it. You can't practice it. It's non-dynamic sort of recognition. You just realize it. You recognize it. And it's always there. Always was, always will be. Sarvam Omkara Eva. So why chant even? What can that possibly add or take away from your water nature, you see? So I'm not talking about water, I'm talking about waves. So if I want to worship a particular wave called Kali, why even give the Om? Just give the Bija. Because that Bija is Kali, and thankfully, like Swamiji said in his poem, Kandana Bhava Bandhana, what is Sri Ramakrishna? What is an avatara, in fact, if not a Chit Ghana Kai, a mass of blissful consciousness? So when we say consciousness embodied, coming back to the idea of the ocean, of a massive body that's dynamic and frothy and surging, that ocean, when it becomes a wave, that's its value to us. So we can't necessarily drink the whole ocean, but we can embrace the wave. In fact, the thing about a wave is we can say Kawabanga and go surfing, which is what we actually want to do. We don't actually want to drink the ocean. The ocean is glorious. But the thing that we love about the ocean is that we can surf, that we can embrace the waves and whatnot, you know. So the wave is Kali, or is Shivji, or is Hanuman, or is Krishna. These are all Chidganakayas, manifestation of the seething and dynamic mass of consciousness and bliss. So the most blissful thing in the universe is an avatara, or is a Devi like Kali, or like a Deva like Surya or Shivji or something. So that's bliss in a more concentrated form. Though the same bliss that they are is present everywhere. Like the same water is present in every wave. But this wave is especially important because it's just massive. It's just got a lot of water in it. So if you touch such a wave, if you think about such a wave, you'll be connected to that Om in a much more direct way. Although in one sense, you're always connected. You're never not connected to that Om. But in terms of your psychological human experience, when you relate to some Sri Krishna or some Sri Kali, that's like relating to the most massive wave, or the most packed wave, or the most intense wave. That's the most desired wave. So, coming back to Buddha, far from being just a stone image sitting silently, his experience of the no-self was like this surge, and he was swept away by it. The whole of India was swept away by it. The whole world is swept away by it now. So I feel like my pendulum is swinging away from peace. Peace is wonderful. Stillness is wonderful. And my God, sometimes that's all we need. Our life is so stressful and so filled with anxiety that what we're craving is just a little bit of peace, just a little respite. Okay, get that first. In this spiritual tradition, we're saying, having found peace, now seek ecstasy. You really want to be peaceful and calm? The stone Buddha is peaceful and calm. Is that the Buddha? Or is the Buddha that madman in love, pacing up and down the street, which is named after this episode in Bodh Gaya, looking for someone to teach this to? How strange. He knows he is no self. He knows everyone is no self. He knows the world is nothing but a momentary, ephemeral nothing. He says as much, allegedly. We think the Buddha, maybe, who knows what he said, but allegedly he said, Sarvam Omkara, he wouldn't say that. He said, yeah, right, what did he say? Like, actually, it's not important what he said. He's not a person of words, he's a person of action and being. Like, the noble silences of the Buddha, the noble silences of a fool trying to comment on what the Buddha said. Allegedly, he said a lot, nothing at all. His being was the teaching. But he's at least known to have taught us Shanikam, Sarvam Shanikam. Everything is momentary. And that's nested in a deeper teaching. Anityam, Sarvam Anityam. Everything is impermanent. So if you had to like think of Buddhism in a nutshell, TLDR of Buddhism is its impermanence teaching. Right? Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism both point to this first, the impermanent and ephemeral nature of reality. And upon that they make the claim, Shunyam, Sarvam Shunyam. It ain't no thing, actually. Turn away from that which does not exist. Why does it not exist? Or rather, maybe not. We don't have to be so metaphysically strong here. We can say it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because it's changing. It's momentary. Why would you care about something that won't be here tomorrow? So just leave it alone. It's not important because it's changing, because it's transient, it's ephemeral. These are all ways of speaking of dynamism, of movement and of change. So if you say the change, the dynamism is ephemeral, is transient, it's momentary, you can then say it's either unreal in the hardest metaphysical sense, or in a soft metaphysical sense, you can say it's at least not important. You know, the world is not important. Buddha had this realization, no? Sarvam Shanikam, Sarvam Anityam, and therefore Sarvam Shunyam. It's void. But also, with this, the other understanding of Sarvam Dukkham, the reason it's so painful is because things are changing. And the reason it's not important, that it's painful is because things are changing. So the moment I stop caring about it, then let it change however much it wants. I'll be free. And therefore the word sarvam, the word shunyam is an antidote to dukkha. If you're sad about something, you realize it's nothing, you won't be sad anymore. So the Buddha was not sad anymore. Arguably, he looked at the world, which had brought him so much desire and yet also so much frustration, and he realized it ain't no thanks, sis. And therefore, he said, sarvam dukkam. And then he realized the truth about himself is the same as the truth about the world around him. Brahman is empty, meaning empty of all my projections and superimpositions. He's seeing it as it is, right? Although he wouldn't say that, lest he reify this reality. So he won't say what it is, but he's obviously seeing it as it is, enough to say that it's empty. Empty of what? It's from the mind's point of view, empty of my mind's projections onto it. But that's true of myself. Myself is also an empty thing, because I thought I was something, but I'm nothing. And by nothing is that I am everything, but he won't say that. So instead, when he has his realization, he expresses it allegedly as anatman and shunyam. So no self and void. So if the whole Buddhism, you to TLDR it, it would be void, no self. The third thing is just silence. Like what happens after, and the thing, you know what's interesting? The Buddha's teaching is threefold. I think that's, okay, no, it's eightfold. Whoops, it's fourfold and then it's eightfold. And I'm just like, sorry, I'm a Hindu. I like lots of colors and singing and dancing, and so do the motherfucking Buddhists, but no American wants to tell you that, because in the West, Buddhism is a stone image in the garden, you know. You guys have a really whacked and cracked out idea of Buddhism. It's like just some like psychological self-help thing here, you know. Anyway, in India, oh my god. In Thailand, oh my god. In Tibet. India basically is not a lot of Buddhism, but in Thailand, in Tibet, oh my god, it's life, it's partying, it's food, it's music, it's mosques, it's dance, and anyway. In America, it's eating a strawberry and trying to be here now. It just feels very flattening, you know, to me, the Buddhism in the West. It's the way the atheist have some sense of mental hygiene, like basic psychology, they call it Buddhism, and they feel better, and then they like are happy because now they don't have to be like religious, and they're very proud of their atheism. And so with their atheist self-help mental hygiene regime, they've taken the Buddha, a dynamic and passionate lover of God, who was martyred on the cross of his love for humanity like their Christ, and they've put him in a stone image and put them in the corner of the garden somewhere. Anyway, we'll see what this has to do with Krishna and Chaitanya and Ramakrishna and Kali in just a little bit. But I don't know about that Buddhism, but talking about like Buddha, I would say like maybe three things, philosophically at least. Shunyam, Anatman, and the third thing, this is important, the first thing is there's void, emptiness. Having recognized emptiness, you recognize the no self. That's salvific. Because if I'm nobody, then nobody dies, nobody gets old, nobody gets sick, right? Nobody suffers if I'm nobody. But what does that mean though? To be a no self. The third teaching is a silent teaching. It's a teaching of his life. This you don't get from what he said. This you get from seeing who he was. And who here really knows what he was like? Except we have clues, you know. And one clue is this street in Bodh Gaya that really fascinates me. Because allegedly, the folklore there, what the people of that town in which the Buddha attained enlightenment say, is that he, in the past, when he attained enlightenment, was walking up and down the street like a madman, looking for disciples, for students, for people to whom he could teach the no self to and void to, people who he could help. Although I don't think he would have called it that. Now look at Ramakrishna. The moment Ramakrishna realized Kali, or like within the time of his realizing Kali, he would go up to the roof and like cry out, where are my like disciples? Where are those people who will come to hear this message? And in one sense we say he's still crying out. The Buddha is still pacing that street, waiting for you to come. The reason you don't come and see the Buddha, who is pacing on the street right now, is because you're sitting with your stone image in the garden, telling yourself that this self-help mental hygiene regime that justifies you in your atheism and your mental superiority is somehow the real thing. Fie upon your psychological appropriation of Buddhism. It's fine, but it's not the real thing. Or rather, there is no unreal things. It's a thing. Who am I to say anything about it? The Buddha. To emptiness. It's attachment to emptiness, for which the great master Nagarjuna said there is no cure. He said, for the world, the cure is emptiness. For an attachment to emptiness, there is no cure. Fuck, that's kind of damning. But it's a warning. It's like, don't be attached to atheism. There is a God, and it's you. And why is there a God? Because there is love. Because there is laughter. There is dance. And if you get into a place where you're saying there's no God, essentially what you're rejecting is the transcendent, which is beauty, which is truth, which is something beyond what you see, and yet is nothing other than what you see. The Buddha, I think, was a great theist. But, of course, look, his theism is in the third teaching, I would argue. The first is, this world doesn't matter. The second teaching is, I don't matter. And so what? And seems like the answer to that question is his life. And what his life shows us is a restless lover of God who was crucified on the altar of his love for humanity. He would rather die than have his host feel bad or something. He gave his life to people. But to him, maybe it wasn't people, it was God. God appearing, or that transcendent reality which he had discovered, which was nothing other than the world. It led to a dynamic, expressive life. So I want to take back the Buddha for the camp of the lovers of God. Because the Buddha is a theist. The Buddha is a theist, and so is Shankara, a great lover of God. And by lover of God, I just mean a dynamic, expressive individual. So Mahakaruna is important. I would say the 30 teachings is Mahakaruna. If you could put a word on it, it would be Mahakaruna. And there's an entire tradition premised upon compassion. So you start with first negating the world, or sarva. First you accept the world, and then you get sarvam dukkham. If you accept the world at first, you'll feel like it's all frustration and suffering. Desire, and then desire frustrated. It's thirst. Then you reject the world. It's all dukkham. And having rejected the world, you can then reject yourself, because the world is an articulation with the self. Rejecting the world means you go within, and by going within, you realize the self too is empty. So having emptied out the world by going within, you empty out the self. Then when you open your eyes, the third thing is Mahakaruna. Because the effect of realizing you are no self is this sudden liberation of all your compassion, which like a wave sweeps you out deep into the ocean of action. It's like a tide that draws you into the dynamic and expressive life. So we'll see with the Buddha, it's very much like with Jesus, very much like with Sri Ramakrishna, very much like with Krishna, very much like all these people that we consider to be avatars. They're dynamic, mad lovers, and their love was unconditional for all beings everywhere. And therefore, they're often quite tragic figures. They're often martyred and misunderstood. They all, to me, remind me of Cassandra of Troy. She's telling the truth, but for that she's exiled. And the truth is not something that can be said directly. This is the problem. People always want the truth in the simple way. But the Buddha, Christ, they're not simple beings, because the truth that they have to express is too simple for words. So the words they have to use are elliptical, inadvertent. The truth has to be sensed. That's why you can't really say anything about bīja mantras. By the way, you guys, this is all a long digression. I'm going to come back now to the bīja mantra. Just all of that was to make this point. You can't say very much about bīja mantras. But you can give them names, and you can intuit something from the fact that different deities share the same bīja mantras. That was the whole point. The whole point of that digression was to say, even though we can't say anything about bīja mantras, we can say some things. And at the very least, we can say Hanuman and Shiva often have the same bīja mantra, or at least Bhairava and Hanuman often have the same bīja mantra. The same is true for Krishna and Kali. Whether that's the Kriya Bija or the Kama Bija, that Bija mantra attributed to Kali is often also attributed to Krishna. So this is the basis, tantrically, just shastrically. If you look at a padati for Krishna, if you look at a padati for Kali, you could say, based on these shastric, meaning scriptural sources, we can at least say this Krishna is Kali. And therefore it's cheap to say, and it's definitely based. Right? So that's why people say it. It's easy to say Krishna is Kali, but it's hard to say why. And you don't need to say why, because the Shastra just gives the same bija. So if the bija is understood to be an ineffable reality to be intuited through sadhana, which is itself a chid ghanakai, a mass of consciousness in the ocean of reality called Om, then that wave which we call Kali and that which we call Krishna is ineffably, by virtue of them sharing the same bija, one and the same wave. You see, that's the first point I want to make. Why is Krishna Kali? The first thing to understand is that we can't say very much about bijas, but we can say something, and at least we can point this out, that Krishna and Kali share the same bija in their mantras. Doesn't that serve as a sort of clue? And often the mantra is very similar in structure also. And even the word Krishna and the word Kali and even the idea of Shyama Sundara and Shyama Sundari. Krishna is sometimes called Shama. Shama meaning the black one. And Kali is called Shyama, the black one, but in the feminine. So they're referred to in a very similar way. And Bengal, you can make a historical point here too. The site for Chaitanya's exegesis, Chaitanya's life, Chaitanya's teaching was Bengal. He was a northeastern Indian spiritual master. His avatarhood is most felt in Bengal. In fact, in Bengal, most everyone considers him to be an avatara. Not everyone, but a lot of people. But not always in India will you get that view. People don't even know who he is. And arguably around the world, it's not always the case that they consider him to be an avatara. Because it's a very different kind of avatar, a different kind of Chidghanakaya, a different kind of mass, more oriented towards bliss than towards knowledge even. So we have this guy, Chaitanya, in Bengal. But we also have Krishnananda Agama, one of the greatest authorities on Kali in India ever. And he was 17th, 18th century. But notice his name also, Krishnananda Agama. He spoke about tantras, mostly Mahavidya type tantras. And he gave these great paritis in his Tantra Sara, which is different from Abhinavagupta's Tantra Sara. Though I don't doubt that he wasn't aware of that former text too, because a lot of these traditions, they build off of one another. So notice another connection beyond just the fact that these bijas appear for both of them to be the same. Another connection is like the historical fact of Bengal. You know, because the great master of Kali, the one who presents the Tantra Sara in which Mahavidya sadhanas are given, his name happens to be Krishnananda Agama, and he grew up in Bengal. He lived in Bengal. He taught in Bengal, which has already been suffused with Chaitanya's love prior to his coming. So the thing to understand about Bengal is it's very close to Assam, and a lot of Tantra is developed in Assam. And in Assam, of course, is where Mother's Yoni is. So Kaulachara, Vamachara, you know, oh my God, it's like its headquarters might be Assam. And black magic, like the Kaula, Vamachara world of sorcery and power and magic, Shiva's serpents and Hanuman's siddhis, arguably it's in Mayong. Mayong is the black magic capital of India. It's in Assam. And it's important to note that this is bordering a place called Nagaland. I've never been to Nagaland, but the very name is very like mythological, Dragon's Land, Nagaland. And it borders like Myanmar, Burma kind of thing like that. It's very jungly, and there's like a lot of Santal type, like autochthonous groups there. And notice that this whole region is very like liminal. It's such a liminal place. Assam, it has its own language. It could even secede if it wanted to. You can speak Hindi and Bengali there, but it has its own language. Yeah, and anybody who's been there, they sense that it's like a earnestness, a sincerity, a pastoral kind of love between people there that you only really feel in such a setting. And so you really feel her there. It's innocence, it's love, it's guilelessness, it's simplicity, coupled with this great primal intensity. Yeah, I've never been to Nagaland, but my friends have, and I saw all his pictures from when he was in Nagaland, like smoking chillum with the babas there, and like there used to be headhunters, and they aren't anymore. A lot of them are Christians now, actually, but they show their heads, which their great-great-grandfathers like had, and all that. It was really great. So looking at these Nagaland photos were awesome, and like just watching my friend like narrate his journey in Nagaland. He was in Assam, then he went to Nagaland just for an adventure. It's great. But anyway, this is Assam. Assam is where Mother's Yoni is, and unsurprisingly, it's considered to be the Mahapirta, the great seat of Shakti's power. Of course, Shakti is the divine feminine. And what is a symbol for the divine feminine? Even from the point of view of Bija mantras, the word A, you know, Kalike, that A sound is the downward pointing chakra, Yoni. So what is a better symbol for the divine feminine if not the Yoni? So the Yoni here, in this case, is in India, like in the geography of India, established in this place called Assam. And so there, it's bordering Bengal, you see. So Orisha, the kingdom of Kalinga, or Orisha bordering, like, you know, and the kingdom, the Bengali kingdoms, and of course, there's Assam. You can see Shaktism is really present in Bengal. So too is Chaitanya's Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So the word Gauda means Bengal. So Gauriya, or the word Gauriya means of Bengal. I guess Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a Bengali tradition. Chaitanya is a Bengali master. Sri Ramakrishna is a Bengali master. And so importantly, Gaudiya Vaishnavism in this region is interacting with Gaudiya Shaktism. So Gauda, this kingdom in the northeast India, or this place rather, Desha. Bangladesh today, modern Bangladesh would be included in this word, Gauda. In fact, Gauda Pada, Shankara's guru's guru, is probably from Bengal because his name is Gauda Pada. Could be. One historical note there. But anyway, putting this all together, bijas aside, you guys, there's a historical reason for why Krishna is Kali. So when someone says Krishna is Kali, just like cheaply on the internet because that's what they've heard, it's totally based, at least in this way, because they share the same bija, but also they could be referring to something historical. Like, historically speaking, the same place in which Vaishnavism develops along Chaitanya's inquiry is the same place where the traditions of Kali have for a long time prospered and developed. I'm just going to put Mithila out of this picture and Kerala out of this picture. I'm Malayali, and arguably, archaeologically, the first temple to Kali was in Kerala. And it's important to know there's a link, actually, even historically, but especially culturally, between Kerala and Bengal. A lot, like you'll see similarities. Both are fish-eating places. Both are metropolitan, cosmopolitan, liminal places. In both places, you have matriarchies. In both places, you see people tying their saris in the same way. Like, it's very, like, both are very learned, educated kind of places where they care a lot about literacy. And it's just like, weird politically, economically, socially, culturally, historically. There's some weird links between these two places that I don't need to go into now. So Mithila aside, Kerala aside, just to make a historical point here, Bengal has been the site of so much going on. It is the capital of the British Empire. So you can't ignore the fact that when we say Krishna is Kali, we might also be making a historical point here. So I just want to say this, because it's a puja class, and because I do actually mean to put a padati in front of you, we just got carried off with the wave and tide of this inquiry, which I'm enjoying very much. We're making this up as we go, as it were. Okay, we're doing it together. We're inquiring. We're doing philosophy together. We're thinking and we're making connections. And so I just want to follow this thought to its conclusion before we pivot. So just because it's a puja class, though, I'm compelled to point out to you that a lot of our knowledge when it comes to tantra, when it comes to both ritual and philosophy, is just because it's said so in the text. It's called a Shastra Pramana, which we value very much. We saw yesterday, remember yesterday we were doing a padati and we were looking at how the exegesis was happening. So exegesis means explaining. And this person was asking, when do you worship Kali? And the claim is that you should only worship Kali at night, and that too at a particular time of night. So it has to be like the Dasha Danda, right? What does that look like? It maybe is 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. So it said Kali is best worshipped after 10 p.m. and before 4 a.m. or something like that. And therefore, the author was pointing out many places in which that instruction is given. That's what we did yesterday. We went through all those rules. But then he also pointed to some other places where it says, oh, you can worship her anytime. And it also, he pointed out to a place where it said, oh, you should worship her at 6 in the morning during the first Mangalarati. And then he's saying, like, how do we make sense of this? So he puts before us quotations from some tantras which contradict quotations from other tantras, and like a lawyer he tries to make sense of this paradox by explaining this. He says, oh, you see, clearly from these references the purpose of practicing it at night is for secrecy. If you can have secrecy in the day, then there is no prohibition against practicing it in the day. So he makes a lawyer's argument based on legal precedent almost to tell you, his students, what to do. And he's saying it's better if you can worship at night, but the only reason why we said that you should, or that Shiva said that you should, is probably privacy. So going off of that reasoning, therefore I think it's okay if you can stay private and stay secret, you might as well do it in the day. Then he asks the question about secrecy. He gives a slew of citation from different tantras. Notice he's not just quoting one text, he's quoting different texts within the greater tradition called tantra. And he's saying, look, these all are saying that we should keep things secret. But then he points to some other sources that say the opposite. And he says, secrecy is clearly something that was meant for previous ages. In the Kali Yuga, it's less important. So don't be too fussy about it. If you can be secret about your Kala practices, be secret about them. And if you can do them at night, do them at night. But the important thing is just to do them. And that teaching, he's not just going to say it because he wants to say it. If he really means to say it, he has to back it up. And the way he backs it up is twofold, both with an appeal to authority, meaning sad agama, and with an appeal to reason, satarka, which is what we're doing here. So I'm first going to appeal to authority. And I'm going to say, according to the text, from the Sad Agama point of view, the bijas that we continually see for Kali and that we continually see for Krishna happen to be the same bijas. On that basis, we can say Krishna is Kali. On a similar basis, we can also say Hanuman is Shiva, because we see Bhairava bijas and Hanuman bijas being repeated. So we don't need anything more than that. Like, already the claim has been made and reference has been made maybe to texts in which that claim can be supported. And we don't need to go into which text right now. We will. Next week I'll show you a Gaudiya Vaishnava Padati. And you'll see there many of the same mantras that you're going to see tonight in the Kali Padati, which I'm going to show you in just a bit. You'll see that they overlap, which shows you Krishna as Kali. But another thing is, like, we can use just reason, and we can use historical data and like cultural data to say that, like, Bengal reasonably must be a place where Krishna has to be reconciled with Kali. Although there are serious tensions, like Shaktas eat meat, Vaishnavas don't. Shaktas sacrifice animals, Vaishnavas don't. There's going to be a tension there, but that tension is also like the friction of longing. It's creative. There's something about disagreeing and having tension that creates something even better. That's why Kerala, Bengal, debating, these are all good places of debate, and the debate makes things better. So, putting all this together, Krishna is Kali for historical reasons, just a fact. They both developed in Bengal quite a bit. Yes, exactly. Reconciliations, dialectics, insert Hegel, Marx. Imagine I just said something very intelligent along those lines, but I have nothing. So now coming back to this next thing, we have Krishna equals Kali. Let's go deeper though. I want to go deeper. There's a different way to answer this question. beyond just sadagama, beyond satarka. I think there's something poetic and maybe Puranic, mythological, that we ought to point out that links these two together in terms of bhava. So I want to make, this third point I want to make is about bhava. So sadagama aside, bija aside, and even practice aside, even historical and like academic points aside, let's look at the bhava of Kali. By bhava is meant mood. Now, the myth, I should say myth, the itihasa, the history, or maybe the narrative. Not to say that narrative means something is unreal, but the story that we tell, not to say that stories are unreal again. Today I'm noticing the word narrative and story might actually be dismissive. Though to Indians they aren't, because the world is a story. And it's meaningful because it's a story. Things aren't meaningful because they're real. Reality itself is a story within God, and that's what makes it real. The flavor, rasa. Coming back to story and narrative, like, I don't know what to call a Purana. The word just means ancient. But the narrative or the story or the mythology or the history around Krishna is this. There were rishis. And those rishis were there in Rama's time. And they asked a boon, actually. It was really interesting because they had attained Brahman. In other words, they had attained Om. They had attained the ocean. Water. They were one with water. They realized all their thirst was no longer there. They had no thirst anymore because they are the water that they've been thirsting for the whole time. They're rishis. Allegedly, these rishis were sitting, absorbed in deep meditation, deep oneness, and then there arose a wave of desire, of ichcha. These rishis suddenly had a desire, which seemed to arise from fullness. It's so important. The reason they found Brahman is because they found the world to be boring. They didn't think that the world had what they wanted. So they went within, and then they found within this fullness, just like the Buddha. But then came this wave, and it's the same wave I think that the Buddha felt, the desire to love. Because what you discover in that oneness is this, whatever it is. Because we see it in Jesus, we see it in Buddha. These ones who have discovered it, like these rishis I'm going to tell you about now, you feel it, this rishi felt it, then suddenly they prayed for something. It was so interesting, they asked for a boon. And their boon was, may we reincarnate. In other words, maybe be embodied again. Like they've gone beyond their body, they're in Brahman. They're like, may we come back as waves. We want to wave a bit. And what's that wave? We want to be gopis. These rishis were like, we're absorbed in Brahman, and now we want to come back and be these cowherd girls. It's really interesting.
Desire
We want to be...
keeps the world going.
The world is desire, and you would think, why would they have desire since they are no longer in the world? They are rishis, so that means they've attained transcendence. They're not in the world. And arguably, the vicissitudes of the world, because the world is described as samsara, it's a wheel, and it's moving, and it sucks that it's moving. Because that means I'm being pushed from body to body to body. And the Bhagavatam, oh my God, is like, you guys don't remember, but let me tell you what your time in the womb was like. And then it describes the most horrific kind of hell. Like, apparently, it was really uncomfortable. Like, we were being boiled in the juices and claustrophobic and terrified and confused. And, like, we forget it the moment we come out, but it wasn't a good time. According to the Bhagavatam, being in a womb, however we might want to be poetic and fetishize that experience, it's, like, good for the mother, it's good for society, maybe, and often it's not even that good for the mother. My God. Like, an abortion activist friend of mine, the argument that she uses a lot is defending yourself from the zombie in an alley. It's interesting. She's like, if you were attacked by a zombie in the alley, you should be able to defend yourself. The mother who never intended to have the child is like being attacked by a zombie in the alley.
Parasite.
Yes, parasite leeching off of her resources. And more importantly, the use of the word zombie, she's appealing to a philosophical tradition where she's like denying conscience or sentience, consciousness or sentience. Like, it's a philosophical zombie, and you're being attacked by this like ball of cells, and it's taking your resources. So to abort it, even if it's violence, is justified. That's her argument, which I think is kind of cool. I'm not saying one way or the other. I think a lot of really important voices. It's a distinction, yeah. And there are a lot of really powerful voices in the pro-life community, many of them women too, and in the pro-choice community, many of them women too, and only women should be having this conversation anyway, arguably. But my friend has this beautiful argument that I like. She was sharing with me, the being attacked in the alley by a zombie argument. Anyway, where was I going with this? Allegedly, if as a baby, like the Bhagavatam seems to imply that you have like experience as a baby, and it's not talking about any trimesters or anything. It makes it look really bad to be in a womb. So the reason why it says that, I think, is to say, like, it might be true or it might just be a story, but the reason I think they're saying that is to like encourage you not to be born again. You seek God now, and by attaining God, you won't be born again. You break the wheel like Daenerys Targaryen or something. So the world goes around, and fuck that shit, right? It's terrible. It's terrible the world goes around. You be born again and again to suffer the vicissitudes of being in a womb, the vicissitudes of being born, like apparently that's what I noticed. The first thing you do is cry in terror because you're shoved into a tight shoe or something, to like borrow from Ram Das Ji. It's like you're like fuck, and then you're held upside down, covered in blood, while an absolute stranger smacks you. Like that was, no wonder everyone's so fucked. Your first experience in life is being like properly smacked, and then, you know, Kabir has that great poem. It's like, oh, when I came into the world, I was crying and everyone was laughing. I want to live my life in such a way that when I leave the world, I'll be laughing and everyone will be crying. So cute, right? But Kabir Das Ji. But okay, the point here though is that wombs are not desirable. Life is not desirable, death is not desirable, rebirth is not desirable, because samsara is a wheel of coming and going. The word samsara means coming and going, and it's powered by thirst, by desire. And it's a desire that can never be fulfilled. So in the desert of this world, I wander about parched, and I die under the scorching midday sun, only to be revitalized, only to continue marching. It's a wasteland, baby. We listened to that record earlier today, Sony will be happy. But like the point here is that we want to get out. And the rishis got out. This is such an important point. They did it. They're rishis, you know, for crying out loud. They succeeded at the great cultural project, which we Indians, and by India again, I don't refer to the political entity that currently exists, which defines its borders in the way that it does now. I'm talking about the civilization, the Indic civilization, which stretched much wider than it does now, and in a more meaningful way, because it's not about land, it's about ideas. And arguably the whole world is the realm of these ideas. So so this is the cultural project, right? And again, notice, they were doing the best with what they had, and at that time, what that looked like was recognizing the impermanence of the world, the allure of the world, and the disappointment of the world, and then articulating release from the world, and then actually attaining it. So I just want you to know, we in India succeeded at the cultural project, which was at that time escaping the wheel of birth and death. We did it. We got that. Like we just have that vidya. And now what? And again, there is something that comes after. That's the beauty of what Sri Ramakrishna is teaching and what Chaitanya is teaching, and the beauty of this story, the beauty of Krishna and Kali. What Krishna, Kali, Ramakrishna, and I would argue Jesus and Buddha, what any avatar can do for us is to show us that there's something after this. So once you realize the world ain't shit, and you go inward and you attain oneness with Brahman, once you recognize the water nature, then arguably this might happen. So the rishis, they had a desire. And I just want to point out how weird this is. Allegedly, the world is motivated by desire, by Trishna. That's what samsara is, right? It's desire. So if you go beyond samsara, haven't you also gone beyond desire? It's an obvious point. The world is desire. Brahman is not the world. Therefore, Brahman has no desire. So we call Brahman nishkama, desireless. And that sounds like a really good thing after you've been slapped around a little bit. Because if the nurse slapping you when you were born was not enough, just wait. Your spouses, your houses, and your mouses, like everyone in the world will slap you silly. You know? Literally. Anyway, after being slapped a couple of times, eventually you have to come to the point where you're like, fuck this. You know, I don't want to be slapped around anymore. And why am I being slapped around? Because of desire. Because that keeps me here, you know. So then Brahman is where there's no more slapping around. You get a high five instead. And in Brahman, how can there be desire? Because desire was the cause of my suffering. It's samsara. The wheel of samsara turns about the axis of desire. Brahman is beyond the wheel. Brahman can't have any desire. So that's desirable. It's desirable to be desireless, having realized that desire is a slap in the face again and again and again and again. How long will I want to continue doing this? I do the same thing expecting different results, and then finally I realize I want a different result. And then sadhana begins, vairagya begins, world awareness, renunciation, dispassion, etc. And then the attainment, moksha. Moksha is important because we did it. Like, first of all, it was an experiment. I like to frame the entire Indian civilization as a kind of experiment. And we, you know, everyone does different things. Like in a free-for-all laboratory, we all have different interests. And the special interests of our civilization have always been metaphysical, spiritual, transcendental, you know, where another place might have, like, to look at energy, or another place might look at, like, machines, and they're all good at their different things. Each is great in its own place. India is great because it's, and by, again, India, I don't mean a political entity, I mean a frame of mind. India is great because it sought its treasure in the eternal, in the transcendent, and in the beginning that looked like this, moksha. It looked like freedom from the wheel of birth and death. And once that freedom was acquired, you just abide there. in a state of oneness. I am that water. And the body falls off like a dry leaf, and you merge. The drop becomes the ocean, and that's that, right? Here's the problem. Once you become the entire ocean, you might realize that your ocean metaphor was uncannily accurate. Because the ocean is not just water sitting there. It has tides. And so you would expect Brahman to be nishkama. We tried an experiment. We became Brahman. Then arguably, some amongst us learned something about Brahman or felt something within themselves as Brahman. And that was this new desire. It's like unlike any desire we've ever experienced in the world. And yet every desire we've ever experienced in the world is rooted in this. So this is where I would say Kaula Marga begins. Kaula Marga, the doctrine of God's embodiment, the doctrine of dynamic God. In fact, why should I call it Kaula Marga? Let's call it Shaktism. Isn't that nice? Shaktism is the recognition that Shiva is that Brahman endowed with desire. I think that's my working definition for Shaktism. Shaktism is any tradition that recognizes the absolute and relative to be one. It is any tradition that paints the absolute to be a desiring being and that is able to articulate that desire as divine and holy and also transcendent. So it's the religion of transcendent desire, which already points to its inherent dynamism. Desire is dynamic. So not temporal. Desire doesn't have to be temporal. It's just instantaneously dynamic. What is echo? You mean echo as in echo, 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 echo? Eco as in economy? As in, I don't know what the word eco... Oh, ego. Yes. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Shiva says I am, and Shakti is Shiva's ability to say I am. That's coming at it from a... I will say though, that view is coming at it from a pratyabhijna point of view, which is a particular school within Shaivism. So if you say Shakti is Shiva's ego, I'll say yes according to Utpaladeva, according to maybe Spandakaraka, according to Vasagupta. But interestingly, within that understanding of Shakti, I'm actually coming at it from a different point of view, and they're actually all reconciled, right? Because I can say the ego of Shiva is the I am, and the I am is a recognition of his own fullness, which creates desire. I can try to reconcile these things, but I'm coming now from a different view of Shakti as Icha. And here I'm coming from a Kama, Kala, Vilasa point of view, a more Sri Vidya point of view, of describing Kali not as Shiva's ego, but as Shiva's stirring, as his desire. Because Shiva is Shiva's ego. Right? What do you say? What do you call it?
Urge.
Yeah, his urge. Urmi, the wave, his itcha, his itch, what is that movement? That's called Shakti. It's what's good about Shiva, what's dynamic about Shiva. It's Shiva's self-reflection, you could say, it feels like this itcha. So what is Shakti? In this case, I'm not calling her anything more than dynamism, and I'm not even using the word Shiva. I'm using the word Brahman to mean the absolute. Brahman just means the vast. So without... And the reason I'm avoiding words like Shiva and Shakti is because I'm trying to talk about Krishna. It's interesting. And in this story, with Krishna, the rishis are experiencing Brahman, and then their desire is to be born as a gopi in this world, in a gopi's body. Interestingly, not even as a princess in a royal court, enjoying the heights of life in its material splendor. They're not interested in that. Arguably, they're interested in being simple village women, young village women, who will have very complicated and socially inconvenient lives. What the fuck? A rishi's wish is to be born a poor village woman in rural India, dusty and tired and probably abused by their menfolk. What? They just want to make chai all the time and never hear their sons and spouses say thank you? What? That's what they want? Yes. Absolutely motherfucking yes. And why? Because what they discovered, and this is fucking insane. What they discovered in Brahman is that this Brahman, from time to time, arises as a particularly condensed wave. And I think they intuited that it was about to happen. The rishis who are absorbed in Brahman, they're one with Brahman. So they feel, this is so weird to talk about, because how can we talk about rishis as being separate from Brahman? They are Brahman. And then we're talking about that Brahman as being now about to come in a wave. Of course the rishis know that, because they themselves are Brahman, who is about to appear now as Krishna. So Krishna, Sri Krishna, is a historical character, a person. But he's not just a person, is he? He's a glint of moonlight playing with the fishes. He was never really there. And yet, he was more there than anyone has ever been. He's something else. He's a transcendent ray of moonlight. and it sparkles on the waves in such a way that we see him, we can kiss him, we can lean up against him, we can fight him, and maybe think that we can kill him, and we can be killed by him. Thank God. He's a person, a warrior, a king. But interestingly, because of some complications at birth, in order to avoid being killed before he can play his Leela, he's ferried away, and much like Jesus, born in very modest circumstances, and he's a king in disguise, a prince in disguise. So now he grows up in this place, Vrindavana, in a setting of cowherds and gopis and gopas, like people whose business it is to like raise cows and herd cows and produce milk and whatnot. Simple rural village, Vrindavana, outside of Delhi. So modern day India, it's outside of Delhi. Now, what happens is the rishis arguably intuit that this is going to happen. They can, of course, they're omniscient because Brahman is Sarvagya. I don't need to get into any philosophical debates there because you can argue Brahman isn't. But like, what is there to know when everything is one? But anyway, not to get into that discussion, to stay on the ball now, which is getting actually harder to do because now that we're actually starting to talk about Krishna, it's like harder to like think. Do you know? It's like, what on earth, what can we say about this? It's just a mystery. It's for singing, it's for dancing, it's for crying. It's not for talking. It's for celebrating. It's not for talking anymore. It's like, what can words say about this? Brahman somehow appears like a ray of moonlight might appear to be a fish. That Brahman appeared as Sri Krishna, and the rishis, arguably, they knew this. And now their desire, which arguably they're articulating within that realm that we in our cultural project assigned as the desireless, in that desireless oneness of Brahman, in which there's nothing other than them to desire, nothing other than them to fear, these rishis had a desire. What the fuck? And what was that desire? The desire to be born in the thankless position of making chai all day, and herding cows all day, and carrying pots of water on their heads all day, and walking great distances in the dusty heat all day. And the reason they wanted to be that is because they knew that's where Krishna would be. So their only prayer was that, may we be born gopis. And importantly, they wanted to be born gopis because arguably, it's the gopi, and it's maybe a bit heteronormative here, but it's the gopi that is going to enjoy a particular kind of relationship with Krishna that these rishis felt would be the acme of all spiritual relationships. Mathura bhava. That's the thing. Like, they could have been born Krishna's friends. Some of them might have asked for that, and they were born like friends, and then they could wrestle with Sri Krishna or something. And maybe there's a room there for less heteronormative narrative, perhaps. But Krishna's friends, like Arjuna, Sri Arjuna, is like he's bros with Sri Krishna. Like, you can be friends with God, as Sri Arjuna was friends with Sri Krishna. As Swami Vivekananda indeed was friends with his master, Sri Ramakrishna. They were friends, like they would joke around together. They felt, as friends do, a feeling of equality, sometimes even competition. Like, Sri Ramakrishna would cry because of remarks that Vivekananda made about him. Isn't that important? And Vivekananda would be upset because of some things that Sri Ramakrishna did maybe, but that never changed their love for one another. They were friends. So Arjuna was friends with Sri Krishna. So you can be Sri Krishna's friend. And Arjuna and Sri Krishna, in some places allegedly, like, they're each other's wingmen also. Like, Krishna helps Arjuna, like, get this girl. Actually kidnap this girl. It's kind of problematic. But in some, like, classical Indian ideal of romance, like, Sri Krishna conspires with Arjuna in this one episode to, like, kidnap this girl that Arjuna's into. So, like, they're, like, hitting on girls together. They're arguably going to the bar in that sense together. They're like, playing together. They're family friends, Almost cousins. Like, they're family friends. And so, you can be God's friend. You could also be God's child. Like, Sri Ramakrishna felt himself to be Kali's child. Of course, various things. He was Kali's, like, everything. But he felt he had this bhava of, like, God is my mother, which is very much fitting with this current yuga in which we tend to see God in terms of the parent. That relationship is also there. But you can also be God's parent. That's crazy. Like, arguably, Yashoda might have been a rishi who wanted that bhava, that relationship with God, with Krishna. So, you might want to scold Krishna and tie him up or something like that. Sounds not in a kink way, but like maybe in a kink way, I don't know, but in a mother's way. Like, a mother might like to scold the child sometimes or be exasperated by the child sometimes. As we saw, Sri Ramakrishna was very exasperated with baby Rama, so much so that he almost drowned him out of frustration because he's so naughty. Because if God comes into the world, you think God is going to behave? He's naughty, full of joy, full of fun. And that's what we call a naughty boy. A boy who is very naughty is usually a boy who's full of mischief, full of fun, always like stealing these clothes and eating what he's not supposed to eat, all in a spirit of joy and play. So Yashoda, isn't it beautiful? Krishna's eating dirt, and dirt is black. And when he opens his mouth, there's like black dirt, and she sees the whole universe. But you can say the universe is nothing but dust. It's nothing but dirt. And so Krishna, what does he do with the dirt? He eats it. I mean, what could be more Kali coded than this? If the dirt represents the universe, Krishna is eating dirt. And like, think of the Kaula Marga implication of this. He eats butter and he eats dirt. To him, butter and dirt are the same. And that's his like rambunctious naughtiness as a child, you know. Actually, I can't talk about Krishna. Like, I just realized like that's just too high. Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of spirituality, like, I can't go, I'm not there yet. You know? Like, yeah, it's like, it's too much of a reach, spiritually speaking, to try to talk about Jesus or Krishna or Ramakrishna. Sometimes I feel like it's better that we don't do it, because we'll really cheapen it. We'll make a monkey out of this Shiva. We're trying to sculpt a clay image of Shiva. And here we are saying things about this which we can't say anything about. You know? I never talk about Sri Krishna, not because I'm not a Vaishnava. It's because I'm a Shaiva who worshipped Kali. And now I'm starting to understand my limits. Like, Kali is Krishna. Huh?
It's not your bhav.
No, not that. No, it's not about bhav. That's what I'm saying. The reason I'm not talking about Krishna is not because it's not my bhav. It's because it's so my bhav. But it's the best version of my bhav that I, right now, understand I can't touch yet. It's a bhava that's so high that I will only like cheapen it. And not only that, I have to like just recognize like how high it is, so much so that like Kali is Krishna, but Krishna is like essential. So essential that it breaks my heart to even think about or talk about. You know, like I love Sri Krishna more than I know how to love, if that makes sense. More than I know how to talk about. So that's a feeling. It's like a deep sense of like, whoa, mystery, I guess. Maybe it's mystery. A deep sense. Krishna is too mysterious. And it's like, it's a madness that I can only aspire towards. The madness of Sri Krishna, which we find is there in Kali. So Kali and Krishna are the same. And I shouldn't put it in this way that Krishna is the essence of Kali. Krishna and Kali are the same, but Krishna is the essence of Shiva. And Kali is the essence of Shiva. Again, they're the same. It's an equivalency, the same bīja, remember? So anyway, let's try to do this. But just to remember, it's like really hard to understand Krishna because like Jesus, like Ramakrishna, it's like the best that we have. And we have some pretty good shit as far as like the civilization is concerned. There's lots of great stuff, but they might cap out at a certain point, and Krishna is beyond that, as it were. So like when you think of Sri Krishna, you have Bhagavatam, you have stories, you can only like really interact with him mythologically and symbolically. But in terms of bhava, it's just so pure, just so intense. Like, in other words, like to feel this ocean, to feel a wave like Kali, to feel a wave like Krishna, there's nothing like it. It's the same wave, again, same bija. Now that wave is just so chidghanakai, so dense, that like, you can just say Ramakrishna and shut the fuck up only. That's why I like Ramakrishna, you know, like what can you say? You can't say anything. I can only talk of Ma. Ma is kind enough to let me talk about it. Ramakrishna is too far. It's just too much spirituality for like a body to handle even, I think. I don't think the nerves can take it, honestly, that kind of spirituality. It's like deeply uncomfortable to me, that kind of spirituality. It's just what it requires of the nerves, like the kind of where you have to be in terms of like the sattvic constitution. Like it's just like, it's so hard and it's so beyond food rules, and whatever we think is sattva is not sattva. It's like this is sattva. Krishna is sattva. And sattva in this electric, maddening way. Anyway, unless we dribble on with meaningless poetry, which is arguably the bhava of Krishna. It's also ridiculous and mischievous and Kali. But like coming back to Krishna, you see like the rishis wanted this relationship with God, which is so strange because this desire cannot be like that desire which they have just escaped through their sadhana, because now they're in a state of desirelessness, having gone beyond conditioned desire that comes through being in a body and mind. The only reason that they would ever now desire a body and mind, do Thursday classes start at 6:30? I actually don't even know now because we're just always on Zoom talking randomly about random things at random times that the schedule doesn't even really work. I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. It just like we just like put it up and we're just like, what can we do? We only ever do this, that we don't really have a time set aside to do this. The only question is whether the Zoom will be on or not for this, and I don't know what to do. So so coming back to this and ramen. But it's also usually yes and, because at ramen also we do this. Now coming back to this, not that we ever left, Sri Krishna, he's going to come. And so too the rishis want to come. Like they want to be there and have this particular relationship. They want to come. And this relationship is called Mathura Bhava. It's not the, arguably, it doesn't have to be the best bhava, but it's the bhava that these rishis desired. So maybe one of them became Yashoda, Krishna's mom. Some of them might have been Krishna's friends, like Sri Arjuna and others. But these ones, these rishis, their prayer was to come as gopis so they can enjoy this particular leela. And that leela is like a sport, a play, a game, where they would be seduced by Sri Krishna. And arguably, there's so many different ways to read this leela. I'm just like offering one way to read it. There are many different ways to read it, but they could have all been 8 or 7 or 8 or something like that. So if you do a chronology of Sri Krishna's life, sometimes you find in the Bhagavatam, the claim here is that the gopis are young girls. And Krishna is also a young girl. It's not a problem the gopis are described as married, because at that time, a lot of young girls would have been married. Now, it doesn't mean that they were like, they were betrothed, arguably. And it wasn't until they had reached a certain age that they would live with their husbands, but they would still be married. It's interesting. They would have a husband that their parents might have chosen for them, that the husband's parents might have chosen, but they wouldn't like be with their husband until like after puberty or something. But they still had a husband, and so they could be 5 or 8 and be married. So the fact that the gopis were married doesn't necessarily mean that they're like young girls or young women. But it seems like, that aside, putting aside like some of these chronologies and things like that, the love that we get described here seems to be a kind of paramour type of love, a romantic tryst. And whether or not it was is beside the point, I think. Because what Sri Chaitanya focused on was this kind of love being that. And so what we get is this idea that these gopis, who used to be rishis, arguably, who at one point, or who right now even, putting aside temporality, these rishis having experienced the one desireless Brahman, the absolute, now desired. And their desire is unlike any of the conditioned desiring we have prior to recognizing Brahman. Their desire as Brahman, and this is what we call Shiva, by the way. Shiva is the word for, in our tradition, the Brahman that desires, the absolute that dynamically plays. And that dynamism is called Shakti. So they experience Shakti. It's essentially what I'm saying. It's like the fact that they experience desirelessness, and then they experience within that desirelessness a desire. That's what we mean by Shakti. Then through that Shakti, they become gopis. And as gopis, age aside, chronologies aside, apologetics aside, like they fall in love with God, who has appeared now as Sri Krishna, a young, handsome, artistic poet lover boy who like calls out to them from deep within the woods. And he's playing this flute, and the music of the flute like just does something to them. It makes them mad. That's important, and mad in a way that actually has social consequences. This is so interesting. So these gopis, let's just imagine now, maybe they're not 5-year-old or 8-year-old girls, or just for fun, just imagine they're young women, like maidens, and so they're young women, Kumaris maybe, and then they just get married, and many of them have husbands, and so they're like with children also. So they could be like 20-something-year-olds, okay, like 30-something-year-olds, I don't know, 40-something-year-olds. They're women, and they're married. I don't know what age they are, but let's just imagine they're like married, and they have children, and they have household duties. And mainly they're gopis. Gopikas mean they're cow herders, so they're milking the cows, carrying pots of milk, they're putting the milk aside, letting it settle into curd. They're stirring the milk. Just an Amish household, I guess. I don't know. and then allegedly they hear this flute. And the effect that it has upon them is so maddening that they decide to do a crazy thing. You guys, even now, like I work in some middle schools, right? And like, even now it breaks my heart. I know so many mothers who have children, who have a spouse, who, have a house. They don't even feel like they can afford the time to take a Mariam Williamson bath with candles. Do you know, like they just like feel bad about it. Like, yeah, probably a mouse, but no, unlikely in Brentwood. There's too much like, no, I doubt there's a mouse there anywhere. I wish there was a mouse. It would introduce some life in some of these places. Anyway, so she feels so sad, this woman, many women that I know, she feels sad because if she were to take a bath, she would be taking time away from her duties, attending to her son or to her husband. Who's going to drive this kid to the soccer practice? Americans call football soccer. Who will take this kid to karate? And the kid has soccer, karate, chess, swimming, all after school. And then on top of that, my extra debate coaching too. So like this is a busy kid, and the mom has to drive this kid everywhere. So she can't take a bath, she feels, because that would mean be very complicated for her, because her husband does this work and he can't drive the kid this day, so she has to drive the kid, and she plans with him, and sometimes he says he's going to do it and then he doesn't do it, or she says she's going to, but she forgets he's going to do it. Like it's like in the course of her life, with all of her errands, She feels like even taking a Mariam Williamson style bath with candles would be too much for her. That's a ritual she can't afford, that self-care. She feels guilty about it. Even today in Los Angeles, 2026, in Brentwood, one of the most affluent places in Los Angeles. Like, even today in such a place, a woman feels like she can't even have a bath because it would be betraying her husband and her child, who she loves, to whom she feels a certain loyalty, maybe even a sense of duty and obligation. Do you see? Isn't that interesting? But she would like to. This woman is crying to me about it. She would like to. She wishes she could, but she doesn't feel like she's allowed. That's what's interesting. And I said, Ma, you will die a walking to-do list. A very effective, very efficient machine. But your heart will be dead because you feel like to desire and live according to that desire would be a betrayal of your society, which has somehow impressed upon your mind that your role is to take care of people. But how can you do that when you're just living this to-do list pretense, And like she wants maybe to sign up at a clay studio down the street, actually about 20 minutes from where she lives, so she can like work with clay. But again, if she can't take a bath, how can she sign up at the clay studio and go there once a week even to like make pots? And yet that might be the best way that she can serve her family, by living again, by finding joy. And how many people I've spoken to like this who right now live in Brentwood in an affluent neighborhood with financial circumstances that would actually allow them to do this if they wanted to. Imagine what that's like then. Maybe it's worse now. Maybe the to-do list is much longer now. But I don't know. I can't imagine that we change that much. We as human beings, we feel obligation to others, especially family members, and especially women. So imagine these women who are just making chai all day. And then suddenly they hear this flute. Now, I don't doubt that this was hard for many of them because their heart wants to follow the sound of the flute, but their mind tells them that they ought not. So the story is often told in this very dramatic way where they just hear the flute once and they run. And I like to believe in the power of Sri Krishna's flute playing, that he can do that. But often the religious experience, it takes more than one knock at the door. It takes more than one rendition of the song. Again and again you have to hear it, You have to hear the flute again and again. And each time you hear it, you will try to like close your ears to it. You'll pretend you never heard it because it's a curse. When the Buddha heard it, because he did, right? In the story of the Buddha, allegedly, there's like was it a Veena or somebody? There was a player who played a musical rendition of something, and the Buddha, that was when he felt like going out of the kingdom. Basically, the song was the worst thing that could have happened to him. It made him a beggar, ruined his life, actually, ruined his marriage, he had a child. The Buddha had a child. He had a wife. He had a life, and his life was free from strife. And he didn't have to look at that. His father tried to protect him from looking at the horrors of the world. But the reason he went out of the palace walls to look at the suffering in the world was because he heard a song. The power of art, And he heard a song, and that song ruined his life. So it'd be better that he never heard it, some would say. He would have like at least lived a comfortable life. He would still be married. He would still have his child. He would still have the structures in his life that keep him grounded. He would still have a schedule. He might be able to tell someone on the internet when the Zoom starts. I don't know. Like, life would be so great without God. God ruined everything. God ruins everything. Fuck God, actually. It'd be better that we never heard about any of this. How much less complicated would life be? We'd be dead, but we'd be safe. We'd be in a crypt, but at least there'll be walls. Sometimes I miss being inside. Sometimes I think about the blue pill, and I wonder if I can take it again. Sometimes I wish I never heard the song. What a different life it would be. And I think about that life sometimes, and I mourn that guy.
Do you really think ignorance is bliss?
It could have been a cool life, I think. And I'm sure, like, when the gopis heard that song, and plus, I don't know if I've really run yet, I'm hearing the song, and as gopis we're at the stove, and now we're wondering, should we run or not? And so these remarks are coming from a gopi at the stove, not a gopi in love with Krishna. Such a gopi would never speak to you. She'd be in the midst of her love play. All this is coming from a gopi at the stove, who hasn't yet taken the plunge, who is now thinking about it. And she realizes that if she follows the sound of the flute, then at least the foxes will have their homes and the birds will have a place, their nest, but the Son of Man will have nowhere to lay his head. She has to give up any notion of schedule. That's the thing. Once you love God, you have to stop planning. And if you stop planning, you have no way of getting your needs met anymore. You have no way of defending yourself anymore. You have nothing, no structure anymore. How can you voluntarily go into the forest? The forest has no structure. The garden has some structure, so we want spirituality to be a garden, and we want Buddha to be a stone, so we can put that stone in the garden and call it peace. It's a crypt with water features. That's what our spirituality is, right? A crypt with water features. And our saints are all just effigies. But this gopi, imagine she's cooking something, her child might be crying in the other room. And please, don't for a moment think they don't have affection for their children, affection for their spouses. Don't you think there was a very real human sense of grief when the Buddha left his kingdom? He had a calling, but that calling took him away from the structures that made him feel safe, the routines that made him feel grounded. It took him away from his life. Why would we wish that upon anybody? So it's a curse, to hear this flute. And the gopi heard it, and she can't unhear it. So I imagine, just to project into the story a bit, that she hears it again and again and again, although in one sense the story is heard just once. The song is heard just once, song, story, whatever. And once she hears the song, she runs. And arguably the effect of it is so maddening, the bliss of the longing of the song is so maddening that maybe actually it's not a dilemma. I like to think that. I wish that for the Gopika. But for everyone, I think it'll be different, of course. And for many people, it does feel like a dilemma at times. At times, it's a no-brainer. At times, when the song is particularly loud, you can't imagine any other life but one in which you run into the forest to find Sri Krishna. Everything else pales in comparison. But the joy and dynamism of the human life is that not always is the song going to be so clear. Sometimes it comes in little haunting, muddled melodies, and then you feel this tension of I have a safe structure here. I could do the same thing every single day. I could be fed, I could be housed, I could have all these things that give me a sense of grounding. Or I could do this other thing. God knows what it is. An artist feels his call, a poet feels his call, an adventurer feels his call. Everyone feels this call. It's the flute. So the gopi, in one version of the story, is so overwhelmed by this love that she forgets everything. She forgets her child in the room. She forgets her husband. She forgets her duties, which I just want to impress upon you now. There's no small thing. It's a big deal. It either speaks to the renunciation of the gopi, or better yet, it speaks to the power of the song. I think it's both. God calls to us, and just to allow for some duality here, we must rush out to meet her. Even though she takes 10 steps towards us, we have to take 1 step towards her. But I think my step is much harder than her 10. Her very nature is love. My nature is deceit and guile. My nature is complication. My nature is fear. My nature is safety, or at least that's what I think my nature is. And what I think my nature is might as well be my nature because I'm convinced of it. And as such, for me to take that step requires that I give everything up. Is that so easy? For God to take her 10 steps, she is everything. What can she give up? So she easily can come to me. But for me to step out, to have to step out of the house, How crazy. So I just want to, for a moment, just contemplate how much of a sacrifice these gopis made. They gave up their spouses, their houses, and definitely their mouses, because then I'm sure there were mouses. They gave up everything. And then the reason they did that, I want to also credit the song, is because the song was so powerful. The freedom and the joy and the poetry and the meaning, they somehow knew that they were born for that, actually. Not to live and die an efficient walking to-do list. So allegedly they rush out. Some of them are half clothed. In India, where that would be such a terrifying thing for a woman to do, not because she would be in any danger, the men would of course be very respectful, but because she would be shamed, often not by the men but by other women folk. That's a sad fact of many rural settings. If a woman were to rush out half dressed, the men would turn away. In a lot of rural villages it's like that, but the women would gossip about it often. They're more afraid of what other women will say. So at risk of social disgrace, which could be horrible actually, they could lose their means of income. They arguably don't have their own means of income. So they could lose their standing, which would mean that they would lose all their protection and they can't remarry. It's a terrible thing. It's like if you lose your husband in this world, and even if you depend on your husband for your income, which doesn't have to be the case anymore, you can still find another. In that world, arguably, if you lost your husband, maybe because he died or something, you would have no way whatsoever to make an income. Thankfully, though, in that world, the community would have taken care of you. Now, what if you run around half naked? Will that same community take care of you? They might not. They might or they might not. It's a big risk. So these women, this is where it gets very important. They were willing to take that risk because of a kind of mad love induced by Krishna's flute. So then they run out of the house, leaving behind their pots and pans and whatnot. And they run into the forest. Again, this is symbolic. They're leaving civilization behind. They're leaving structures of safety behind and moving into a wild, untrammeled place. And they're doing this at night. The nighttime is also a very important metaphor. They do not have Ras Leela arguably during the day. And when we read these stories, they break up their play during the day. Like there's these stories of like Radha is leaving the grove and she's like holding Krishna's shawl. And then the other gopis notice that she's coming out of the grove holding Krishna's shawl, and they all like either giggle or feel jealous because she was just there with Krishna and they weren't. And when we read stories like this, we realize Krishna is in this relationship with the gopis and there's infighting. They scheme against one another, they have problems with one another, they have to reconcile, they're jealous, all these things, very human things. And arguably, the story is about a relationship with God, and it humanizes that relationship. That's another thing we have to notice. It's very human to feel love for God, and it's very human to feel afraid of what that love might mean for you. And then you rush into the forest and you realize so too have all the other gopis come, and then Krishna is there playing the flute, and he's able to then be with each gopi in the way that they specifically need. And then they have this Leela, and it's always at night, arguably. There's a particular place where they all go. Now, this is where it gets interesting. In the Vaishnava tradition, allegedly, Lord Shiva feels this... Thai, it's good to see you, Manjai. Lord Shiva feels this desire to be part of the Leela. I mean, okay, like in the Shiva sense, he is the whole world is Shiva. But let's say Shiva is a deity. Now, he realized the best possible thing to do right now would be to go to this party. The party is Sri Krishna making love to all the gopis. So what Shiva does is he comes disguised as a gopi. There's even a temple there in Vrindavan to Shiva as a gopi. So Shiva comes disguised as a gopi, and then he makes love to Sri Krishna. So it's all the gopis of that village with Sri Krishna, plus Shiva, who is sneaking into the party in order to play with the gopis, and Radha, who is of course Gopi Rani. She's the Prema Avatara, the greatest lover of God, arguably, that we've ever known. Until maybe Sri Ramakrishna or something like that. Like the Chaitanya and Sri Ramakrishna perhaps are analogs or somewhat close to this Radha, but nothing is like Radha. We say Vivekananda is like Radha, to know a love like that. So Radha, she was as a gopi, the greatest lover of Sri Krishna. And the first thing that happens arguably in the Ras Leela is they're all playing, and then the gopis think, oh, this Krishna is mine. Then mamata comes. And again, suddenly a contraction. So it's interesting. There was a contraction in the village. They left that contraction and now they're with God. With God, there was another contraction. And then they have to give that up too. So it's really remarkable. It's like they killed the Buddha at the road. They found the Buddha and they killed it. They also have to give up God. It's remarkable. They gave up their life for God.
God is dead.
And now they have to give up God. They say God is dead because unless they do that, what they love is their God. Their idea that it's my God. But in fact, Chaitanya will emphasize that very thing, to think of God as your very own. It's very difficult to understand. But in any case, the story is they all feel something. I don't know what it is. It could be mamata. I don't know. I feel like that's a virtue, not a problem. But whatever they felt caused Krishna to disappear. I think this is where Ras Leela really begins. Because before this, Ras Leela is the joy of rasa, the bliss of God. But now they realize that bliss is actually dynamic. Because it's a bliss that comes and it's a bliss that also goes. You see, and when it goes, it's another kind of bliss because now they feel this restlessness. So allegedly in the story, all the gopis lose their Krishna because of some thought. I don't know what that thought is. Could be, this is only mine, no one else should have it, something. But then they notice that Radha is not amongst them, and they see there's a set of footprints. One probably Krishna, one probably Radha, and they've gone away, as it were, to go and enjoy the Ras Leela somewhere else. And so then Radha will experience this too from time to time. Although she's arguably the gopi of all gopis, and although Krishna seems to prefer her, she's Krishna's favorite, it seems like even she feels this longing. And what we get, the poetry and the music that we get, seems to be more about the mad grief of longing than it is about the mad joy of union. Of course, it's both. And when you read Mira's poetry, you see that she's describing things in terms of the smashan. Oh my God, there's a song where Mira is like, you are the one holding the fire and I'm on the funeral pyre, light me up. Come on, baby, light my fire. I don't think Radha wrote that song. Maybe she did. I don't know. Through Jim, whose apartment I used to stay at, actually, just down the street. They boarded it up the other day. I saw. It was so sad. It's called the Tree House. It was really more of a trap home than a trap house. But I used to stay there. It was great. It was music all the time, among other things. What a life it was. But it is. But Jim Morrison's Light My Fire, that sentiment. Mira, this great poet, is saying that Krishna is about to light the fire of her funeral. And in that song, she's expressing that she's one with Krishna. And so you get songs where she's expressing her oneness, but more often you get songs where she's expressing her pining, her yearning, her longing, which leads Tulsidasa to say something so profound in his reflection on all of this. He says, one tear cried, he's mostly speaking of Rama and Hanuman, but it's the same bhava of devotion. He's saying one tear cried in the name of viraha, in the name of that longing for God, after God has separated. That one tear cried for viraha is greater, Tulsidasa says, than all the joys of the world combined. So you could say, what did the Rishi want? The Rishi who was one with Brahman. The very fact that he could have wanted anything at all is laughable. But he did want something. Allegedly, he wanted to be born a gopi. And what did that gopi want? That's the question. And did that gopi want Krishna? At great cost, she gave everything up for Krishna. But arguably, there's something else that she wanted. She wanted to want Krishna. So that's the beauty of it. It's the wanting that is complete in and of itself as wanting. That's what makes it different, arguably, than the wanting that we feel in the world. That restless wanting is not complete. It doesn't come from completion, and it isn't itself complete. It's a restless, aggravating sort of wanting coming from lack, which seeks fulfillment in something. This wanting is just yearning for its own sake. It's interesting. It's dynamism. Like that's what the nature of this yearning is. It's just dynamism. It's just like life. It's heartbreak. It's sadness, and it's also joy. Really it's madness. It's madness. So the mad love, l'amour fou, that these gopis feel for Sri Krishna, that seems to be the point. It's like that meme. I almost forgot this was the whole point. And you can imagine there's like a gopi, like disheveled, half-dressed, lying by the side of a tree, like looking at a creeper that reminds her of Krishna, and she's weeping. And she's like, I almost forgot this was the whole point, to be ruinously in love. And with that which is love itself. So that love is infinite. So what they had was human, decidedly human, allegedly. Like they feel a love for Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna returns that love, and they have this leela, and it could be puppy love between 5-year-olds or 8-year-olds or something, or it could be like a more romantic, sort of sensual, sexual thing. But arguably, like what Narada says about this is really interesting. What they're doing is transgressive. That what they're doing is wrong. They're cheating on their husbands. They're giving up their duties. They're like running into the forest and doing something that society would consider is unethical. But Narada justifies them by saying, to this there could be no fault, because they had the understanding of what Sri Krishna was. So because they knew that what they were doing was for God, because they knew Krishna was God, there's no fault in what would otherwise be correctly faulted. That's what Narada, by the way, I'm referring to a verse in the Narada Bhakti Sutra where Narada considers the gopis and considers them the greatest expressions of love. The gopis are the greatest bhaktas of all. But then he says, and you might have problem with that. You might have problem with me saying that, because you might think that they are just like these adulteresses, running off with some boy in the woods. But no, it is not like that, because they were jnanis. And they knew that this boy in the woods was God. And they knew that all things are permissible for God. So Narada offers a defense almost of the gopis' love, and he defines bhakti as parama vyakulata. Parama means supreme, vyakulata means yearning. So it's so interesting. These leelas are so interesting because Sri Krishna, he seems to kind of engage in the deception also. So like in one leela, so Radha Rani's family is Narasingha Avatara, but she marries into like the Shakta family. This might be a later story that captures some of the tensions in Bengal between Shaktas and Vaishnavas, and also the obvious reconciliation. So what happens is, Radha Rani sneaks off into the woods to go be with Krishna, because the leelas are always happening at night. Through the course, the whole night, they're like celebrating this leela, and in the morning, it's always like Krishna comes out and his face looks red with the, or Radha's breasts are red with the powder of Sri Krishna's face. So things like that. I mean, like these very sensual, very erotic things. And, Indian aesthetic literature, it's like, oh, the bite marks were in the shape of the moon, the crescent moon. Like Radha had a bite mark on her neck that was the shape of a crescent moon. Sri Krishna had 3 streaks down his back. Like allegedly, Indian love seems to be, like in Indian romantic literature, seems to only be real if like there are marks of scratching and biting and like, pastes and robes are exchanged or something, and the whole thing is like illicit and kind of like tee-hee sort of, oh my god, will they, won't they, kind of like, it's part of the literature of India. It's like that. Anyway, there's all these leelas, right? And one leela, at night, Radha goes off to see Sri Krishna. Now her husband starts to suspect something. Not just that, her husband's sisters, I think, so Radha's sisters-in-law, they go to the husband and say, we have word that your wife is unfaithful, and right now, as we speak, she's sneaking off into the forest to go and be with her paramour. You better come and see. Now, the husband He's like, oh my God, okay, let's go. So with the sisters-in-law, they all go. And allegedly, when they get to the forest clearing, Shri Krishna knows they're coming, right? So like what Shri Krishna does, so interesting. In this story, Shri Krishna tells Radha that your husband is coming. And it's not going to be good for you if he sees this. So then what Krishna does is he turns into Kali. So this is a very important story actually, because the Palaharani Kali Puja references this moment. So he turns into Kali and then invites Radha to worship him. But here's the thing. This is also very telling because Kali likes to be worshipped with goat and with wine. As you saw in last night's Padati, right? We read a Kaula Padati and in it said, don't worship Kali unless you have Panchamakaras to offer. That's what she likes. Whether you like it or not is beside the point. In fact, it's better if you don't like it. Then we know it's for real that you're worshipping Kali because like you're giving Kali the things that she likes. And in the Shastra it says she likes wine, she likes her goat, whatever. But Radha, it's not really her bhava. Although she, has Nirasing Avatara as her family deity, although she's now in this like Shakta, Durga worshipping family, like she doesn't have a goat to slaughter for that, but she doesn't have any Panchamakaras. And Kali says, that's okay, just worship me with fruits. And the Bhagavatam also, it makes claims like, you worship me anytime, anyway, with sincerity, I love it. Gita also makes certain claims like that. So anyway, Radha starts worshipping Kali with fruits. And then the husband comes and says, like, peeks into the clearing and sees Radha worshipping Kali, who is their family deity. And this husband is like, you fools, he says to his sisters, look, she's come into the forest to worship our family deity. How good. This is wonderful. This is like a good thing. And then he goes away. So notice what Sri Krishna is doing here is, in one sense, he's reconciling the idea of Krishna and Kali. Krishna appears as Kali, almost to say, oh, this is my form. And then says, and now you can worship me however you like. Then he does this, interesting, the second point I want to make here, as part of an ongoing deception to reify Radha's unethical conduct by the eyes of Indian society, almost to say that God is beyond morality and the love for God is blameless, which is a problematic position that we should make with a lot of nuance and tact. Because obviously people can make this statement and then justify their own immoral behavior or goad others into immorality. Like this is the critique of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, in that they fetishize adultery, which is very convenient if you're trying to get someone to cheat on their spouse. You could say, well, let's just be Krishna and Radha. I'm Krishna, you're Radha, and so this is illicit, but it's good that it's illicit. That's what happened. Culturally in India, as a result of these stories, there was this quote-unquote moral degradation amongst Vaishnava communities, and that led to a moral panic about these stories. It's like these are troubling, problematic things to present to people because it almost glorifies, fetishizes, and legitimizes things that would be socially disruptive and maybe arguably ultimately ruinous to one's health, wealth, and well-being. So these are problematic stories, and therefore there's a tradition of both fetishizing and apologizing for this kind of tradition. And notice, like Kaula Marga, like Vamachara, it's a tradition that has been misunderstood, misrepresented, and when properly understood, maybe also even persecuted. It's a very interesting thing. It's something that's done in secret. The Rasa Leela is done in secret. The tradition is often practiced in secret. And there's a spectrum here from right to left, if we want to use those more modern terms, as to how to interpret this Leela. The most right-hand teaching here could be like, you guys, you're overly sexualizing this, you're overly romanticizing this. Look at the Bhagavatam, track Krishna's life, and look, he's obviously 5 or 8 or something. They're probably also 8. And if they're women, then they're more like Yashoda, in that they're like charmed by him and they like love him and dote on him. But all these stories you get of bite marks and scratch marks and like this whole thing, that's later, and that's more of like a fetishization and a romanticization of what doesn't have to be that sexy. On the other hand, you get people who are like, oh no, that's all apologetics. You're all just like ashamed and shy about what happened. In fact, God comes, God is a person, and God comes. And you can come with God. That's what happened. And then what that means for you is interesting. The whole thing could be just something you think about and contemplate and feel. Or it could be something you try to reenact. And so arguably there were entire communities in the Vaishnava world, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava world, like the Karta Bhajas were accused of this. What they were actually doing, nobody knows. Arguably some people know. Whoever did. But allegedly they were doing what in the Kaula world we call as Chakra Melapa or Chakra Puja, where they would get together and arguably recreate the Rasa Leela. So in some cases, you had literalists who would like literally try to recreate this Leela. In other cases, you had those who wouldn't literally understand, wouldn't read these things literally, and even when they read them with apologetics. So what you get is and by apologetics, not a pejorative, it's just a technical term that we use, right? So what you get here now is a spectrum from right to left based on how we interact with the story, but it's just one story. It's like one episode in Sri Krishna's life. Like at one point of his life, Sri Krishna, perhaps as a young child or young boy or something, or young man, was playing a flute, and in this cowherd village, he himself was a cowherd. There's so many stories of like God stealing his cows. Like there's like all these leelas, in the Bhagavatam books like 10, 11. But it's just one story. We also meet Shri Krishna in other places where he's conquering demons and killing them. We see Shri Krishna on the battlefield, in the Bhagavad Gita, teaching Arjuna something. And here, he's not like cavorting with gopis and playing flute and enjoying himself. Here, he's also still enjoying himself. He's Krishna, he's full. But here, he's teaching. He's in the position of guru. So Sri Krishna as guru, and this guru lila is there in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in other places. And Sri Krishna as lover is here in this Mathura Bhava coded kind of sensualist story called the Rasa Lila. It's uniquely important that Sri Chaitanya focuses his entire tradition on the Rasa Lila. So it's not just Sri Krishna that Sri Chaitanya is obsessed with. Importantly, it's a particular bhava, or a particular, by bhava is meant mood, a particular bhava of Sri Krishna that he likes, which is this Mathura bhava. So according to like this Sri Chaitanya tradition, which can be understood in many different ways too, like ISKCON, the American tradition, it's founded here in New York, but it's obviously coming from Bengal. But when it was founded here, it had a more orthodox, more right-leaning kind of flavor, and arguably their bhava, as I've heard, I'm not in that tradition, but from those who have conveyed it to me, their bhava tends to be Sakhi bhava. Like they'll talk about they're mostly interested in this kind of innocent love with Sri Krishna. They might not like this Radhe Radhe kind of thing because it leads to perhaps a place that might be morally ambiguous and difficult to justify. So especially when you're like public facing and you're trying to establish a tradition where everyone in front of you is a judgmental Protestant Abrahamic coded person, like you want to be extra careful about those things that they might immediately dismiss as like uncouth or barbarous. That's why we couldn't like put Kali in front. I just have sympathy for the missionaries who came to India and saw Kali and they're like, oh fuck. Like how would they possibly understand the nuance here? And arguably, wouldn't you feel the same if you were a person who walked into a Catholic church for the first time and you saw that they were worshipping a tortured guy and then eating his flesh and drinking his blood? Nuances are required, and very rarely do we have the patience for them. So this is a nuanced story, and you have to be careful because the way that it's played out in India has been controversial, to say the least. Obviously, people are going to take advantage of this kind of story to maybe get people to do something they otherwise wouldn't want to do. That's the problem. It creates problematic situations where consent becomes dismissed, and where maybe it's not like the context of an ethical non-monogamous relationship sometimes, where the wife asks the husband if it would be okay. In many cases, of course it wouldn't be okay. To even ask would mean that she could be. So it's like, what do you make of this story that seems to fetishize, or at least highlight, illicit romantic relationships? And then what do you make of a theology that later says this is an even more intense love than what Rama had for Sita? Because Rama's love for Sita is a married love. It's arguably a chaste love, a love that is socially and legally enjoined, which means there is no disgrace for Rama to love Sita. And arguably, when that disgrace is possible, he gives Sita up. Can you imagine? When he has to choose between his kingdom and his duty and his wife, his love is to dharma, to duty, and to his people. And so his love is impersonal, and therefore is willing to give up Sita in order to rule his kingdom, although it's a great personal and tragic cost, right? With the gopis, they're willing to give everything up, the world up. They give up their kingdoms, as it were, to rush out and be with Sri Krishna. So arguably, like, this love that the gopi feels for Krishna is way more intense than the love that even Rama feels for Sita, because it's a love that has real consequences. In other words, it's ruinous love. It must be really great, because to follow that flute means to ruin your life. The flute will loot your house of all your treasures. And so to be okay with that means you must have really found something. So that's why this love, it's first of all illicit and problematic, and it's maybe even more problematic because then theologically we come and say this love is the best kind of love there is. Like, actually, human life, there's nothing like a good affair. That's a problematic thing to say, but a lot of people will testify to the fact that like in their lives they might have had great marriages and great children and great lives, but like there's nothing like that affair, arguably, because it's something different maybe, or maybe because it's something forbidden and therefore it has a certain charm. I don't know. Psychologists can talk about this. That's not really our position to comment on. But at least in this case, the theology seems to argue for the supremacy of Mathura Bhava. And the claim here is that, like, while there are many ways to relate with God, like you can relate as a friend, which is arguably higher than relating to God as your master, which is obviously higher than just like an impersonal awe that you feel about God, which arguably the rishis might have had. And you could say, like, you can relate to God as God's mother, God could be your child, but the Mathura Bhava is supreme. Because allegedly it contains within it all these other things. Like in Mathura Bhava, your lover can be your teacher, can be your master, and you can have impersonal awe for them as a principle even. You can like revere them as your friend. You can revere them as your teacher, and you can joke with them as your friend, and you can care for them as your child. And also something else, right? Like one other thing. Sorry, my middle school kids are going to a debate tournament on Saturday. So usually they get all this excited energy, and they're all like texting in the group chat with the parents, and like I don't know how to get my computer to stop dinging every time they text, and so it's just gonna ding, okay? Like it's just a sound, it's okay. Now this is so important though, because like what we're essentially advocating for in the Krishna Leela is mad love, which is worth pursuing even when it's impractical. It's the kind of love that is impractical. And in fact, we're defining love as that which is inconvenient and impractical, but that seems to highlight its value. There's something deeply human about the impractical, irrational love that we feel. You know? And that's what Krishna symbolizes. So when you think about the madness and the intoxication, when you think about the transgression, oh, thank you, Asha. Okay, I'll text you about that. Okay, good night, sleep. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing, it's like supporting, like, it's not even arguably something that can be socially articulated. It's like this personal quest that a person embarks upon when they hear that call. So notice, it turns away from questions about society, questions about legality, questions about morals. It turns away from the world and turns towards something which is mad and wild and incomprehensible and ruinous. So to love Krishna is a very tragic thing, because it means that you'll have to give the whole world up. And it's tragic because it means that that thing which you love will ruin you in a second way also. The first way in which it ruined you is by ruining your life, which could be very freeing. You're like, yes, I don't have to think about 3 p.m. anymore. I no longer live the kind of life where the construct 3 p.m. would be valuable, as we discovered. And then, for what? For this bhava, for this experience of God, for this rasa, only to feel it go away. So Krishna, the love that you feel for Krishna will ruin you because he will also leave you. That's the thing. And that's why the Leela is this wonderful thing of like, where's Krishna? Where's Krishna? Oh my God, have you seen my Krishna? I'm in love with Krishna. I can't find him anywhere. The trees remind me of Shri Krishna. That breaks my heart. The color of this flower is blue like Shri Krishna. It breaks my heart. Isn't this the kind of flower that he would wear in his hair when he was on the swing with me? Oh my God, the way the wind sounds now whistles like Shri Krishna. Would that he were like a nose ring that I could wear so he would always be touching my lips. Would that he would be like a sari that I could drape him about my waist and like that be with him all day. Like that, these gopis are in this state, and they're in the forest just losing their shit, right? And then what's his name? Uddhava, he tries to talk them out of this. Like Krishna in Dwaraka, in a kingdom far, far away, convinces his best pandit to go to this gopi loka, to go to Vrindavana, and talk the gopis out of their mad love. This whole thing is called the Uddhava Gita. It's a beautiful non-dual treatise. So Uddhava goes, you know what Uddhava says? Gopikas, why are you so upset? Like, don't you understand that Sri Krishna, and you guys know this better than me even, that Sri Krishna is Brahman. He's the non-dual reality in all things, as all things. So aren't you also that? That's what Uddhava essentially teaches the gopis. They teach the gopis, Uddhava teaches them that what they're seeking is already inside them. It is them. And it is non-dual consciousness. And it's not any particular form. And they shouldn't fetishize Sri Krishna. And they shouldn't like mourn that he's no longer with them. You know, instead, they should realize that they're always with him, inseparable from him, and be done with it. And the Gopikas respond to Uddhava in this very interesting way. I actually love the Uddhava Gita. It's a beautiful non-dual text. It suits my bhava in most cases. But the gopis, they don't really buy it. And not for lack of understanding. You know what they say? It's so cheeky. At the end, they say, Uddhava, what you're saying is very good, but it requires reasoning. And reasoning requires a mind. How can we reason with you in this way when we've already lost our minds to Krishna? Isn't it a beautiful understanding? It's like, yeah, you're right, but I don't care that you're right. it's not for lack of intelligence, it's because of the madness of love that your arguments will mean nothing to me. Do you know? You just want Krishna and you know better. But what can you do? The heart wants what it wants. It's like a whole different realm. And this a second level of impracticality. It's like the greatest pundit of non-duality can tell you that what you're seeking is in all things, as all things, it's what you are. And that won't matter to you at all in that moment, in that love, that craze, as it were. You see it with Ramakrishna, you see it with Vivekananda. It's like restless madness. There's another story where the Gopikas go to Dwaraka, and in Dwaraka, they see Krishna. But this time, he's a king and he's wearing a turban. In other words, the Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita, riding the chariot, sagaciously teaching Arjuna about the nature of reality and about dharma and whatnot. And here the king is sitting in his throne, probably with Rukamini, his wife, and he's ruling a kingdom. And the gopis come to see him, and they see him and they think, who is this man with a turban? We don't want this man. We want our Krishna who is a cowherd. And this is also important in Vaishnava theology. In the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, Shri Vishnu Narayana is considered a kind of king. He rules the world. He has all these qualities, sarvakya, sarvakartritva, like that. He knows everything's omniscient. He's all-powerful, sarvakartritva. And what else does he have? He's Aishwarya, Tejasa, all these things that make God God. In other words, God is Bhagavan because he has the Shad Bhagas, but that means he's a being of great splendor and awe. You feel like this kind of feeling of, oh my God, kind of thing, you know? That's how you would feel about a king. And so when you go to see God, it's like going into the court of a king. But the thing about Jesus that made him a really wonderful king is that he didn't have a crown, that he wasn't seated on a throne, that you didn't have to speak to him from like a far away distance. You didn't have to have some courtier come out and pull out a scroll and say, here is King such and such, who is of the lineage such and such, who is the conqueror of foes, the scorcher of enemies, the tamer of wild men, who is the yogi of all yogis. Like, none of these epithets are needed. None of this formality, none of this like pomp and ceremony. You know, when some people went to the Vatican, they felt sad because they were like, what, the Vatican? Like, why do they have these guys in purple robes marching around, and why are there trumpets, and why is there so much pomp and ceremony and wealth? Is this really Christianity? You know, the bhāva that St. Francis felt arguably when he saw the papacy for the first time. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi, Alec Guinness, the Pope, comes down from his throne. Isn't that a beautiful moment in that movie? It's called Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. Have you seen it? I have a film for you. Oh, it's heartbreaking. Because it's like, Donovan does the soundtracks. That doesn't help how beautiful the film is. But then St. Francis, in this scene, he's like aghast with the pomp and ceremony of Catholicism. And he loves Christ, and he loves Catholicism. He came there out of good faith to ask a question. And the Pope is moved by Francis, actually. The Pope comes down and kind of takes off all his things, and he's like, yes, I too was like you one day. And then, anyway, that movie aside. In this scene, Christ, who is a king, is breaking bread. Probably, like, they didn't have tables back then. So this whole Last Supper scene is very European and very, like, anachronistic. He was probably sitting on the floor with other people, his disciples, in a room lit by oil lamps. And he was, like, breaking bread and talking with them. And he was just, like, among them. Like a fish made of moonlight, playing in the waters with all the other fish. There was no pomp and ceremony. It was just immediate, it was direct, and it was real, and it was powerful, and it was good that they ate and drank and made merry, for they were in the presence of the Lord, of the bridegroom. And again, notice the whole bridal mysticism thing. Oh my God, it can go in this whole like Christ, like bride for Christ kind of direction if we wanted to, but we'll stay with the Kali stuff because you'll see there's an energy. If you look past the word Krishna and Christ, if you look past the word Kali, you'll see that what we mean by Kali, what we mean by Christ, and what we mean by Krishna are all the same thing. You know, and we just call it Ramakrishna. When these things are expressed, we just say Ramakrishna. So if you ever loved Kali, you will eventually love Krishna. You must. If you love Kali and not Krishna, something is wrong. You know, it's weird because if you feel the energy of Kali in any way, shape, or form, you will feel the energy of Krishna. I'm not a fan of the fan club necessarily, you know, because I kill animals and eat them, and, you know, like, I'm a Shakta. I drink and I kill animals and I worship Kali and I drink blood, and, like, I'm, like, just like a different, and they're usually vegetarians. They don't eat onions and garlic, and I'm eating my onion curry, and, you know, like we have very different worlds. So don't judge Shiva because of the Ganas, and don't judge Krishna because of these modern day gopis. You know, it's like, it's different. Like, these are just people. It's just like Hanuman's monkeys and Shiva's Ganas. Like all that aside, like communities aside, you know, representations of God aside, even the names aside, Krishna, Kali, whatever. When we say Kali, when we say Krishna, even Kali, one of her names is Krisha, right? Krisha. Krishodari. When we say Kali, we say Krishna, we say Christ. I mean, just look at that. Isn't the bija mantra the same? They're all ka sounds. Jesus Christ is just another way of saying Jai Kali or something. I don't know. Like, they're all like very similar sounds, the ka. So their bija mantras, their names are very similar, and the bhava is similar, which takes me back to the Buddha actually, pacing up and down the street. Takes me back to Hanuman, full of power through asceticism, now burning down Lanka in a regrettable act of rage. It takes me to Bhairava, who kills Brahma and is full of intoxication and anger. You'll see what we're essentially talking about is God the dynamic, God the immanent, God who is love. And that love is as love does. So when you look at someone like Krishna, you can't think of him without Radha. So Radha is a necessary counterpart to Sri Krishna, so much so that she's considered to be one with Sri Krishna. So in the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, they might not say that. They might describe Sri Krishna, and this is the Goswamis kind of articulating a philosophy around Chaitanya's life, just like we articulate a philosophy around the Buddha's life. They might not actually be teachings of the Buddha, and what we call Christianity might have nothing to do with Christ. So just keep in mind that this theology might have nothing to do with Chaitanya. But what the Goswamis articulated is his view that Sri Krishna is the absolute nature of reality, and he has this hladini shakti. I love that word, hladini. It means delight or bliss. So his hladini shakti is his ability to enjoy himself, as it were, and Radha is that hladini shakti, his love. So Krishna's love is called Radha. So Radha, the historical figure, or the mythological figure if you want, is a prema avatar. But who is prema if not Krishna? So Radha is an avatara of God, but the purpose of the avatara is to love. So all the gopis are avatars of Krishna, so much so that they're now called avatara angshas. So notice what happens, you guys, it's crazy. Brahman is in this moment coming as Sri Krishna, but it's not enough for Brahman to come as Sri Krishna. Brahman must come as Sri Krishna with Radha, with the Gopikas, with Arjuna. You now have the idea of avatara angshas. So the avatara never comes alone. The avatara, God's wave, comes with a bunch of other waves, and they're all like waving together. Like God comes as a gang. God is gang. And that's why the Ramakrishna Leela is so interesting, because when Ramakrishna allegedly as a child decides to descend, avatara means one who is descended, when he descends into the world, he brings with him this rishi, and this rishi is Vivekananda. So allegedly a rishi is sitting and meditating, a baby comes and says, I'm going to the world, will you come? And the rishi indicates that he will. And then Sri Ramakrishna, when he saw Vivekananda, he's like, you're that guy, you're that rishi who I cajoled into coming. Isn't that interesting? And then not only that, he'll say to Shashi and Sharat, oh, you guys were there with Jesus. He is Jesus. Jesus coming as Ramakrishna. Sharat and Shashi came back then as Peter. And so much so that one time, Sri Ramakrishna actually sat on Sharat, as if to imply that upon this rock I shall build my church, which is exactly what fucking happened. Sharananda became the general secretary of the Ramakrishna mission, and he was the one that basically petered the whole place up, Like Sharadananda was Ramakrishna's Peter. And arguably, Ramakrishna would say, I saw you at the Chaitanya's Leela one time, you were in the crowd. He would point to M and say that. And Balaram and whatnot. So, it's weird because Sri Ramakrishna is recognizing people from previous Leelas. And he's making this point that, Vivekananda, who used to be a rishi, absorbed in the non-dual absolute, has now come to play this game. Arguably, Vivekananda is Radha. This is a secret, in our tradition. You think Vivekananda is Shiva and all, but understand Shaivism in this way. Understand Shaivism as a Shakta. Shiva has a desire, and his desire is to be Radha actually, or rather Gopi, because what Vivekananda is, notice Ramakrishna declared this. He said Vivekananda will teach inside and outside. So what was Vivekananda's life if not an offering to all beings? Sarva Bhutarpanam Vivekananda Rupa. Who Vivekananda is nothing but an expression of total mad self-effacing love. He killed himself at age 39, as it were, in the work of loving and serving others. One of the last things he did in his life was give a Sanskrit grammar lesson. You would think, how lame. Wouldn't he give a beautiful, rousing spiritual talk? No, because to him everything was spiritual. Teaching someone Sanskrit grammar is as important as teaching someone the Gita. In fact, playing football with a child is better even sometimes than reading the Gita, because that's what the child responds to. So this is why we don't make any distinction between sacred and secular, because if we love God, we see God in all things. Notice this is what Radha did. It's so crazy. Radha was not able to see a tree. She saw Krishna. And when she saw a creeper creeping around the tree, she saw her love affair with Sri Krishna and how she, like a creeper, would creep around the tree. And again, Radha's world she was like a holy erotic in that her whole world was constantly reminding her of Krishna. She didn't see a table first. She saw Krishna first. I use the word table, not that there were tables then, but because Vivekananda said that once. He said, before you see the table, see God. Never approach anything except as God. Notice, only a great lover of God can do this. I had a crush, have a crush, and when I'm crushing, everything reminds me of my crush. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just always want to talk about your crush, and you always think about your crush, and you're like, oh, that reminds me of this time with my crush. You know, like when something is very important to you and when it's something that you think about all the time, everything reminds you of it, or everything is always just one synapse firing away from that thing. Haven't you noticed? Even in like regular human love, if I'm like crushing on somebody, I only think about that girl. Like I'm just like, oh, she might like this song, or like I can't wait to bring her to this place. I better take a picture of this and send it to her. Like, you know, you're always thinking about, like, the world is now read in terms of that girl, from or for you, that boy or that person or whatever, or like that thing or that job or whatever. It's like you get a new job that you love, you're thinking about it all the time. Notice, what you love is the framework through which you experience the world. Like, your world appears to you according to that which you love. And so if you love God, the world is God. And a great lover of God will see the whole world as God, because you're only ever thinking of God by nature of loving God.
God-colored glasses.
God-colored glasses. Except you would argue that was the nature of the eye the whole time. I just had on these, and I got broken. And then Vivekananda, he doesn't have a sense of sacred or secular. I think Radha, in Radha's life, is demonstrating that. She has no sense for the sacred or secular. Everything is equally God. Doesn't this sound really Kaula-coded? If you put aside the word Kali and Krishna, Kaula and Gaudiya Vaishnava, you put aside all these words, look at what the both traditions are actually saying. Why shouldn't I lick the urinal? Actually, be careful. There's actually good answers to why. But like, is it really that different? And then we, in the Kaula Marga, we have Vira Bhava. We say, oh yeah, meat is bad. It will ruin my spirituality. Let's try and see. And maybe it does. Maybe you die. Like, there could be casualties on this path. But it's like, yeah, walk your talk. If you say the world is non-dual, show me, live it. And don't be afraid of whether or not you wash your hands before you do a ritual. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, go beyond your rules for ritual, which at some point of time might have been helpful, but now, in light of non-duality, and how do you get this Advaita? Again, it's an Advaita based in the devotion of God. Like, this Kaula Marga, the Advaita of Kaula Marga is very theistic. It's very like, I love Kali, and therefore everything is Kali, and I am Kali, and like, you know, like, what's the problem? What's one thing versus another thing? Vivekananda showed us that. There's nothing between, there's no line demarcating the sacred and the secular. Swami Brahmananda said in English to Swami Prabhavananda, show me the line where matter ends and spirit begins. Everything is God or nothing is God. How can some things be God? And if some things are God and other things are not God, you love God only partially. But if you truly love God, you can't help but see God in everyone. And if you can't help but see God in everyone, won't you love everyone if you really loved God? And if you loved God, you would love God so much that you wouldn't just see God in everyone, you would see God as everyone. And why just everyone? What about every one thing that appears to be insentient? Wouldn't that at least be gods, if not God? You could say, we're all gods. Gods as in God, capital S. Not to pluralize the word God. We're all God's possessions. Like the thing, this is God's. And by the way, when your crush comes over, and she leaves something behind, isn't that wonderful? Like, she leaves a piece of clothing and then you smell it and you're like, notice, isn't that the same as like experiencing them to experience something that they own or that is associated to them? Like, it's enough to like hold something.
Essence.
Yeah, it's like their essence is there actually. Like, even if, okay, smells are very provocative, and I'm showing like, you know, a knight goes off to war, and his beloved might give the knight a handkerchief or something, and then when he's bleeding out on the floor, having been lanced by a javelin, he like smells the handkerchief, and he knows that he would have died in a chivalrous display of love to protect her back at home from the foreign invaders or something, you know. Have you seen the Dracula movie? My God. Be careful with that. If you have lover boy energy, like if you're like a lover or a yearner in any way, like fuck, that Dracula movie though, he's like waiting for her to reincarnate. What the fuck? That was really a romantic movie. And he goes to war to like help her. Yeah, my Turkish friend showed it to me because it was released in Turkey like last year or 2 years, like earlier. I don't think it's been released here. The new one, has it been released yet in America? When I watched it, it hadn't yet been released in America. I was like, I watched it in a different place, different country where it was released. It's called Dracula, a Love Story or something. Okay, I don't know if it's released, but it fucking hits. It's so great. But notice in that film, he's going to war. Oh, you saw it here? Okay, then maybe it's released. It's so fucking good. It's beautiful. But notice he's going to war to protect his lover. Like, you go to war out of love, actually. You kill others out of love. And that love is expressed as a handkerchief. Like, the handkerchief is the person, more or less. And so, notice, if this is not God, can you at least accept it as God's? If you accept God as the source of all things? You know, I once heard a really good argument for God having form, which is an important thing in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. God has form because all these things came from God. How can the effect be so different from the cause? If these things have form, then God, who is the cause of these things, must also be a form. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, anyway, all that aside. And,
It's logically sound.
yeah, it's sound. And there's another very good argument that Chaitanya, I think, allegedly gave, according to the Goswamis. He says, which is a better kind of knowledge? Indeterminate knowledge or determined knowledge? In other words, is knowledge that's like vague, ambiguous, and broad better than knowledge that is specific, definite, and formal? Obviously not. In the latter case, you have definite knowledge. In the former case, you have indefinite knowledge. So to have knowledge of God, it is better to have knowledge of God with form, which is definite and real, as opposed to this vast, amorphous, ambiguous knowledge of Brahman. Isn't that beautiful? These are wonderful ideas. And so arguing for form is a really interesting thing in Chaitanya's Leela, because the bhakti that you can have for a form that looks like you, that you can fuck, arguably, even at least in your mind, is way more intense as a human than just like this impersonal idea of God as reality itself.
Don't seek God, see her.
See her. And then
See.
ask for her number. That's what the gopis did. They had a human relationship with God. And it's like just something so special and so weird. So obviously, this is allegedly a historical like situation in which the guy came, his name was Sri Krishna, and Radha was in love with him. But now notice, it's not just history, it's theology. So according to Sri Chaitanya, this is the greatest possible love that you can have, and Radha is the Prem Avatara, who is the greatest possible lover of God, because she is God. More importantly, she's God's ability to love himself. It's almost exactly how we think of Shakti, you know. I gave lectures last year and the year before. I think since 2023, I've been very like consistently lecturing on Chaitanya around this time of year, in the springtime, around Holi, you know, Holika, celebration of Sri Chaitanya's Purnima. His birthday is coming up. So I've been giving a lot of lectures, and many of them have been very philosophical. So I've been like telling you about Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy as I understand it, and comparing it philosophically to other traditions. I think I have a lecture called Abhinava Ramakrishna and Chaitanya or something like that. Comparing, I just do a lot of comparative work and say, oh, this is how it's the same, it's how it's different. I don't want to do that now, so I want to focus on something else. So just zeroing in a little bit now, if you don't mind. Krishna is Kali, but notice, when we think of Radha, it's theologically very similar to how we think of Kali. Kali or Shakti, as Dalit Maji was pointing out earlier, it's like Shiva's ego, ahankara, which here means his ability to say I am, his ahamta, or his sahaja aham bhāva, that ground of his natural and easeful sense of I am, that Chit Shakti, that's his Shakti. But we say she's also his ability to delight in himself, to explore the infinitude of his own being and like bhāva out on it, to be blissed. She is Ananda Shakti. So Vimarshana Shakti is the same as Ananda Shakti. Because to be aware of yourself, if yourself happens to be the infinite, if you see yourself, then you will feel bliss if yourself is the Ananta Paripurnam Bharupam. You know what I mean? It's like, if you are infinite, and if it's true as the Chandogya says, Yovai Bhuma Tat Sukham, Nalpe Sukham Asti, if it is indeed true that the vast brings joy, that the vast is synonymous with joy, then if you are the vast and you know that, well, if you're happy and you know it, right? Like, this is it. This is God clapping. This whole thing is God clapping. I once fell in love with a girl who had this most endearing thing of clapping every time she was excited. It was the most girlish and sweet thing I ever saw. She would just like clap. Like when she was delighted, she would just clap. How I lived for that clap. I was so happy. I was so happy to see her be delighted. And the simplest things would delight her. And she would always have this little clap. And I can still see her clapping. And I look at this world and I think this is just Kali clapping with delight. She's just... And there's a Ram Prasad song there, right? Like of the kites flying. And each time a kite flies, she claps. Yeah, and when that one girl, when she clapped like that, I was like, that must be it. Like Kali claps like this girl. Right now, when the kite is released, Kali's clapping. And the whole world is that, Kali clapping, you know. Because like Kali is Lord Shiva's clapping. Whoops, that's kind of dirty also. But this is so important. This is so important that the way that we speak about Kali as the aham bhava of Shiva, or the ability of Shiva's chamatkara, his poetic rapture at himself. That's how we speak of Radha, with of course some important philosophical differences, like there is Jaratva, like there is Maya Shakti also as an outer concentric ring, there's Radha, Radhini Shakti. But okay, importantly though, Swami Vivekananda is Radha because Sri Ramakrishna said Swamiji will teach inside and outside. One of his greatest teachings is that there's no difference between sacred and secular. As Sister Nivedita points out, that was his legacy. Swamiji taught us that the world is God. God is the world. And so whatever you do is puja. Gita also taught us that. Krishna, in the form of the Gita, taught us to think of the world as, I think of any action done selflessly as a ritual, as karma yoga. Where before, karma yoga just meant fire ceremony. So Krishna ji in Bhagavad Gita has already redefined karma yoga, expanded it to include a lot, but Swamiji arguably goes further in one sense. But I wanted to get there, because Swamiji even dispels the idea of God. It's so interesting. Why? You don't even need God. The world is God. So if you just do science, you'll get God, actually. It's a remarkable thing. He says so, the art, science, and religion are three distinct means for realizing the same thing because of Advaita. So you just be a great artist, or you can just be like a great scientist, or you can be a great mystic. All three will get the same outcome out of life. Because what makes religion better? God? Well, God isn't a thing. God isn't transcendent only. God is the world. So why even do religion? You could just do science. Isn't that beautiful? And so religion is so important because you understand this is what we mean by religion. This love for life and this selfless quest for the good, which is defined each according to their own swadharma, their own law of their own growth. Now coming back to this though, it's so remarkable that Radha was the choice that Sri Ramakrishna went with when he said Swamiji will teach inside and outside. Like we don't need to get into the nature of that teaching. It's a profound teaching. But he wrote Jai Radha. When he was describing Swamiji, and more importantly Swamiji's teaching, he said Jai Radha. There was a phase actually where Sri Ramakrishna kept referring to Swamiji as Radha. It's so remarkable because only Radha could love like that. You see, the way Swamiji lived his life, he gave his life for everyone. For the commonest person to the greatest Maharaja. His love was never conditional, and it was intense. Like to be loved by a Swamiji. Like look at how he loved the world. He loved the world like Buddha loved the world. So my feeling is that the Buddhas and Ramakrishnas, the Buddhas and Vivekanandas of the world, they were great lovers of God, and their love for God expressed itself as their love for humanity. But only a Prem avatar can love like that. And the Prem avatar in question here is Radha. So Radha is Sri Krishna's Hladini Shakti, meaning his power to enjoy himself. And when personified, her name is Radha Rani. So the two of them demonstrate to the other gopis, who are partial incarnations of Sri Krishna, how to love. And the gopis, along with Radha and Sri Krishna, demonstrate to the rest of the world what a romance with God looks like. It will ruin our life, and thank God. Thank God it will. Isn't that wonderful? So now, last point I want to make. When we think of Sri Krishna and Sri Radha, when Sri Chaitanya enters the picture, things get very interesting, because the avatara vada of Sri Chaitanya is unique. Unlike the Bhagavad Gita that argues the role of the avatara as the arbiter of dharma, right? Yada yada hi dharmasya. Chaitanya seems to make a case for the avatar as an incarnation of joy and celebration. Not necessarily to come and correct the dharma. But if you want to reconcile the two ideas, of course you can, because the way to reconcile them is to say that obviously the way to protect dharma is to be happy and joyful and celebrate. But the emphasis is different, as opposed to like a teacher of men come to correct us in our error. It's now more like, I just love, and I'm here to love more intensely, because I can as an avatara. The leela of being your lover, O Lord, is way better than being you. So I want to taste your sugar, not be sugar, as Ram Prasad sang. And so here I am. But notice, Chaitanya, the leela of Chaitanya is that he's considered to be an avatara, but not just of Sri Krishna. He's an avatara of Sri Krishna and Radha in ecstatic union. So when you read Abhinavagupta, his opening verse in the Tantra Loka is like, I was born from the commingling of juices of my two parents who are coming together as they have sex. More or less, right? Vimala Kalashraya Abhinava Mahashishi Janani, saying Lord Kali, or rather Amba, mother, she's the ground, the stainless ground. His mother's name was actually Vimala. So the stainless ground of reality, with ever new genesis. It's always producing something new. And Lord Shiva is that five-headed one who delights in this genesis. And my heart is formed from the fusion of those two. But he also means my father's name is Narasingha Gupta, who is famous, and my mother's name is Vimala, and both of them fucked. And my heart was born, my being was created from the commingling of their spurata, their ejaculation. And now, because of that, my heart is full with the nectar of Anuttara, the life-giving or immortality bestowing nectar of the highest reality. Let this heart shine forth. So Abhinava is describing himself as the meeting ground of the love sport of Shiva and Shakti. That's what Chaitanya's avatarahood is. He is the incarnation of Krishna in radical union with Shakti. How beautiful, right? So putting this theology together, now you see the Kaula approach of seeing everything as God. The mad love that we find for Kali expressed by the disregard for rules and the willingness to use the full spectrum of emotion. The emphasis on immanence and embodiment as like a more radical embrace of non-duality. And the expression of the purpose of life as aesthetic rapture, as joy and as beauty, as bliss. All of that is synonymous. If you put aside Kaula, Marga, Vaishnava, Kali, like even Christ, it's good that they drink and make merry for they're with the bridegroom. Like the Christ, it seems like he came to party. His first miracle was turning water into wine. Like, what do you expect? He was a party boy from the beginning. His first miracle was like making sure the wedding was lit, you know? I think that's symbolic. Like he's here to show you the wedding is lit. It's lit, where it's a wedding. And who is that who has not on a wedding garment? Bind them hand and foot and cast them into the outer darkness. That was a really crazy parable. Like if you in Mark, what the fuck? Somebody comes, but they're not. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. But the wedding, the bridal mystery, all of that in Christianity, the Kaula Marga emphasis on union of Shiva and Shakti, and the ritual, even the Kaula Yaga, Krishna and his love for Radha. Notice if you go beyond the Bija mantra alone, if you go beyond the historical facts, you'll see the approach is very similar. Radical renunciation, a madness that is impractical, that ruins all forms in our life. An ecstasy that plunges us into embodiment and embrace and affirmation as opposed to negation and denial and retreat. Notice bhavically, in terms of bhava, Krishna is Kali. In terms of bhava, it makes sense that they have the same bija mantra. It makes sense that they're two traditions that grew up together and like nourish one another and influence one another. You just can't quite get past this fact that whether you call it Kali or Krishna, essentially you're speaking about the same thing. And that's why Ramakrishna is uniquely important, because he's like a bridge between these two worlds to show you that no bridge is needed for that which is not in fact true. So Ramakrishna is as important to the Vaishnava world as he is to the Shakta world, because what he's embodying is common to both worlds. This bhakti, but a bhakti rooted in asceticism and power. And that power here is understood to be love, mad love. So Sri Ramakrishna, he very rarely asked people to read books. But the one book that he felt was important to read, even though it had ideas that were not really in keeping with his broad-mindedness, was this book composed in like the 15th century or something like that, about Sri Chaitanya. Basically the biography, the definitive biography of Sri Chaitanya's life. So Sri Ramakrishna felt like, as a priest of Kali, who was teaching what he taught, that it was important for you when you encountered him to contextualize what he was in the light of Sri Chaitanya. Isn't that so beautiful? Nobody really knows why it was important to him to like recommend this book. But I think it's because unless you know something about Chaitanya's mad love, you can't really understand anything about Shiva's mad love. You can't, or I should say Bhairava's mad love. So Bhairava is an incarnation of Shiva, but with embodiment, with life. So we say Bhishana Bhairava, the terrifying Shiva, or the terrified Shiva. Or we say Krodha Bhairava, the angry Shiva. Or we say Chanda Bhairava, the fierce Shiva. Like there are all these different kinds of Bhairavas, 8 Bhairavas and of course many more. But each one is like Shiva plus some emotion, which you would consider to be worldly. Here, Lord Shiva is experiencing the emotion because it's intoxicating. It's an enlivenment. So the whole tradition of aliveness, restlessness, madness, I consider Shaktism. So whether you want to call that Krishna and the love for Krishna, or whether you call that Kali and the mad love for Kali that Bhairava feels, in both cases, we're talking about a dynamic, living spirituality that moves towards embodiment. This is why I offer the claim, Krishna is Kali. Okay. May this be an offering to Sri Krishna, who is none other than Kali, who we call Ramakrishna. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu. Oh well, too bad about that puja class. Swaha.